It was in the fall, 92 years ago. Deputy Sao Chion said, Mr. Leader, it was the right time to invade Zhongyuan. The Murim alliance is in chaos. The faction has split, the people within it are now engaged in a power struggle. Therefore, while a war has broken out between them, it's time for us Heavenly Demon Holy School to take action. Just give the order and we will capture the minions of the alliance, Sao Chion said. But suddenly the leader turned to Sao Chion, but Chief Kuo-K refused him. He said in an angry voice, Can't you see he's reading? So bury Sao Chung. At that time, Chief Kuo-K could not stop the research to write his book. The title of the book Becoming a War 100 in One Day. But with his head down, Sao Chion walked away. It's been 10 years since that meeting. The deputy came to see him again. And said, Mr. Heavenly Demon, the members of the Sa clan had seized several roads and confronted the John clan. Now is the most excellent chance to join the fight. The leader with anger inside simply turned his head in disagreement. Then his mind was completely absorbed in thinking about what martial arts teachings were. Time flew by quickly, and the deputy's requests never stopped. When 15 years had already passed, the deputy told him, 16 Leader, he heard that the number of absolute Zhongyuan warriors does not exceed 10 people. If only you provide him with 3 combat troops, the flag of the Heavenly Demon Sacred School. And soon, all of these will appear in the center of the Murim Union. After that, the deputy was still mumbling about something, but he doesn't remember much about it. Perhaps Kuo-K was busy thinking about how to eat tansayuk that day. It had been 31 years by then. An old man he didn't know came to see him. But I still remember his persistence. He called himself Cheon Wul-song. As it turned out, he was assigned to a new deputy position. Bowing, he said, Let him, the current deputy, Cheon Wul-song, report to you. He said that he had found a way to cause turmoil in the opponent's environment without engaging in battle. We should put one of your secret books with them, thus creating dissension in the enemy camp. If memory serves, he said something to that effect. It is only worth it for you to empower him to give orders, said this old man. Although Kuo-K felt a little guilty since the old man was trying his best. But at that time, Kuo-K was very angry, since it was at that time that he came up with the theory. Hey, you too can become one of the 10 great warriors of Murim in just 1 month. After careful research, Kuo-K had only come to one conclusion: in order to rise to this level of martial arts proficiency, one would have to train for months. The old man kept up, and asked to be allowed to take over the leadership of several commanders, and guaranteed that they would be able to crush the alliance in no time. With an exasperated look, Kuo-K ordered the entrepreneur, if he came again, he would throw him into the Shaolin Temple for religion. After that, the supervisor threatened that he would shave the head of the person who would come to him at least once more. After the supervisor's words, the subordinates immediately stopped harassing him. A year later, Kuo-K realized that he had accomplished everything he could on this earth. Proud of himself, all he had to do was join the Sony Immortals. He wondered if he went there, would there be anything more interesting than an earthly human body? Unable to give up his physical body, he considered what to do next and decided to reach an unheard-of level of martial arts that no one in the history of Murim had ever managed to reach before. A level that would surpass even the depth or the escaped demon. This is his life's work. It's a task he must accomplish at all costs. He should have reached the sacred demon level, which is also called the demon god level. After a while it was already 25,320, his failure. This time, however, he had prepared himself seriously. He believed that he would succeed. Suddenly he couldn't feel the ground. And he shouted, Pour it! He knew that the right thing to do was to let out a stream of inner energy. If his internal energy was what it was 3,840, he would not have been able to lift his body into the air so easily, said Kuo-K. Now of the goals he had set, it was left to him to soar beyond consciousness, deep into space. But doubts did not let him go, knowing that the great founder of the Heavenly Demon School had fallen right in front of the entrance. Even if I fail, I will become a celestial like Bodhidharma, thought Kuo-K. Soaring upward, he shouted forward to a level no Murim warrior had yet reached. From this point on, Kuo-K must maintain maximum unconsciousness, and create a protective barrier around himself. The light of the celestial world takes to itself everyone who retains even a fraction of consciousness in contact with the body. Flying up, Kuo-ke turned to the creature to see if it could hear him. He asked, "What world are you in?" Answer the creature. Poking it, he asked what was beyond the gate. Suddenly a woman's voice was heard. Kuo-ke was surprised to hear her. "Don't even think you can escape from here alive," the golden dragon woman said. The unintelligible voices in his ears kept Kuo-ke from concentrating. "At this rate, Kuo-ke's barrier won't hold." Hearing threats that he would die by any means at the hands of a woman, and she shouted loudly, "Lig weather!" With an angry look, Kuo-ke told her to calm down. After all, he was trying not to die here. Asking what kind of freaks dare to interfere with him. Asking the question, "Who is she?" Kuo-ke didn't get an answer. So he threatened her not to get on her nerves with her chan. "You better show yourself. Come out now, you sneaky cowards," shouted Kuo-ke loudly with anger in his eyes. "Refuse, you fools!" Suddenly the voices stopped. Not a single voice was heard. Kuo-ke wondered if they were from the celestial world. Suddenly, as he flew upward, he felt something grab his leg and would not let go. The light had grabbed him. "Unhook yourself," shouted Kuo-ke. "If this keeps up, Kuo-ke will really become a heavenly being." With no other choice, Kuo-ke will have to forcefully lower his level. With many attempts, he kept failing. And he wondered if someone was stopping him. Suddenly, a voice warned the golden dragon and ordered him to flee. After all, he's being searched for all over space. No matter how long it takes, he will destroy Kuo-ke with his own hands. After the celestial demon had fallen into a state of Chuema, about a month passed. A few letters to the Murim Union shook Kanho, Qinghai Mountain, the main unit of the Murim Union. Suddenly, someone turned to the Murim Union guards and said, "This is an urgent matter, escort me now." It was the girl who asked the guard where the head of the union was. The guard immediately replied that he was upstairs. She immediately shouted at the door to the head. The head looked up at the sky and asked, "The private has come?" Chegalyu kneeled down and apologized to the head, and said that she arrived right after she received the letter from the carrier pigeon. With her eyes down, she turned to the headmaster and asked if she had understood the message correctly. With excitement in her eyes, she couldn't calm down and asked again, "Is it true that a tragedy happened to the great master of Kunlun Mountain Range, Mr. Kianum, who is one of the 100 strongest warriors?" With grief in his eyes, the head said, "The body hasn't been removed yet. And what is written in the letter is the truth." "Then right now we should take revenge on them," said Chegalyu. The head said that he had gathered the 9 great clans and the 5 great families for the war. With a surprised face, Chegalyu asked the head, "Where are the enemies now? Had they gone to Tibet?" "Then it turns out they are in the sacred school of the Heavenly Demon." In the Tibetan Heavenly Demon sacred school, the head was chastising his subordinates, and asked how come they had crushed even the hidden Steel Soul group. "They have been massacred on the 3rd and 4th front lines. The remaining fighters continue to fight hard, but they will not last long. Even if they are demonic beings, they are still insignificant." The deputy's hatred was so strong that even his subordinates stood in front of him in fear. Suddenly, one of the subordinates turned to the deputy with the words, "3 battle squads of our school are made up of first-rate, invincible warriors. How about we put them into battle and watch the result, Eldernock?" As far as the elder knows, the number of those types is several tens of thousands of people. And the troops whose strength could be compared to the strength of our 3 heavenly demon sacred school battle groups have already perished. Suddenly, the deputy asked his subordinate if he was sure that our best fighters would be able to prevail in such a situation. Hearing such a question from the deputy, all the subordinates were silent for a moment, and no one offered their options. "Then what do you propose to do?" asked the deputy. All the subordinates began to resent. One side resented the senseless deaths without knowing the cause, and the other side wondered who they were. Suddenly, out of nowhere, someone shouted for everyone to be quiet, and said the death squad had already entered the fray. Now all we have to do is wait to hear from them. The deputy was surprised at the stranger's words, and ordered him to introduce himself. He turned out to be the commander of the death squad, Haik Yun. He came to report the information. "What's the situation, Commander Hyun Yun?" Did you repel the enemy attack? Asked the deputy bailiff and looked at him menacingly. The commander, without thinking for a long time, began to tell that there were only monsters there that even he had not seen in all his 50 years of life. We certainly tried to hold on and crush tens of hundreds and thousands of monsters, but they were getting bigger and bigger. These monsters were just enjoying the carnage. As a result, our squad stood for 15 minutes and was crushed into a collapse. Hearing this, the whole deputy was very upset. The commander apologized to the deputy. Does the leader know about it? Asked the head. All the subordinates looked at each other, but no one answered the question. Our leader's strength surpasses even the founder of the Heavenly Demon School. If the person who has advanced one step ahead of all the martial arts teachings of the Heavenly Demon Sacred School enters the battle, we will be able to survive in this troubled time. But even if he arrives, the deputy can't face him. If he is to die, then so be it. But it is not in my power to inform him of such a shame. Suddenly the sky began to darken. When the deputy saw it, he asked, "What the hell is that?" Recognizing the monster, the deputy shouted, "Oh!" Suddenly, broke the glass and they argued right at the deputy. The subordinate asked the deputy if he was okay, but the deputy yelled to everyone that it was an enemy attack. The monster blew off our entire headquarters roof in an instant. "Who is it?" everyone asked. And the commander, when he saw it, just said, "That's it. It destroyed our suicide squad." The deputy ordered everyone to go into battle, and said the following words: "This place is leaving and the Heavenly Demon Sacred School is over. Even if you die, still fight." At that time, the head was barely able to resist. However, he lost his inner energy, which cost him 1800 years. By pressing the acupuncture point, he paralyzed his body and lowered his energy by 1 level. If he couldn't do even that, he would die on the spot. However, as a result, the head fell into the state of Chukwema and had to suffer the pain of hell. However, the head still escaped the path to the world of the celestials. He said the level of the bound demon was so close, but it all went to hell because the head couldn't focus. Who the hell did those voices belong to, he wondered. But there were 2 of them. Suddenly the head smelled something burning and looked up and said it must be from the side of the headquarters. Have they finally grown up there, he wondered? I should have practiced like this from the beginning. However, the uproar does not mean that they have become stronger, the head said. He needs to get to the bottom of it all. But suddenly he was distracted by a silhouette in the black sky. And he wondered, what the hell is that? Could it be a dragon? It's flying toward headquarters. Battling the dragon one-on-one, the great chapter mage was left with the choice to kill the dragon or not. But suddenly the dragon told him, "That is your choice, mortal." Dragon downloaded. He didn't think the great mage of Granada Rivers had met such a lowly end. He knows how this is going to turn out, right? Dragon asked. The dragon asked the mage with a laugh. With anger in his eyes, the mage told the dragon that he continued to behave arrogantly. Even in death. The dragon laughed at the mage's words and told him not to feel sorry for him. Without thinking, the mage cut the dragon's heart. Raising his heart above his head, he addressed the master of the demonic world, the great demon Ilduro, and introduced himself to him as the great mage of Granda Rivers himself, telling him to make a deal with him. In honor of the deal, he gives him anything he wants, even the heart of a foul dragon, said the magician. Hearing his requests, the great demon Ilduro appeared before him. The mage asked that he grant him the power to eradicate the dragon race. In defeat, the leader and his subordinates were very wounded. The leader called them devilish creatures. Why the hell did this happen, he wondered. Suddenly the demon asked the deputy if he thought he would go unpunished. Karaya himself, the deputy, asked for forgiveness from Mr. Manager. When he arrives, you'll all be dead and begging for mercy, said the demon. You're the lowest creature in the world, talking nonsense till the day you die. Is everything stowed? The king asked his soldiers. Yes, King Lich. We did not leave a single rat alive, said the king's warrior. Right, otherwise we'd have to worry about the consequences. If you find anyone else in the building, kill them on the spot, the king ordered his soldiers. Suddenly King Lich's servant came and said he was ready to report to the king. Speak, said the king. Since we were unable to find any traces of the golden dragon nearby, the tracking magic was activated to the maximum. Mephisto asked the king. However, because of the nature of the mana we felt for the first time, and because of its constant remediation, there were problems in the search. Therefore, it is not possible to track the location using magic at this point. We apologize, King Lich. We thought this was the only place the golden dragon could have escaped to, Mephisto said. The king heard this and told Mephisto that no apology was necessary. Even the king who gave you the order didn't expect something like this. It seems that the traditional method of mana management is not widely used in this world. If King Lich didn't receive Manu from the demon heart, it wouldn't have been possible for such an army to come here. From now on, the king will reduce magic to a minimum, deploy the search anew, ordered the king to his servants. Because of the lack of information about this world, unexpected things happen. But there's still plenty to play with, said King Lich. Everyone who died in this place possessed the skills of sword masters. I can't believe that there are wars capable of slaying a dragon in a dried-up land where there is no mana supply using the Tree of Life. Raising a deputy into the air, the king mockingly asked, and this one was in charge here? Several thousand ghouls and hundreds of monsters, including skeletons, died at their hands. More importantly, even the half-human, half-monster that fought on the front lines had fallen. The king didn't even realize the jihad wouldn't stand. We must take note of this, said the king, and the king ordered his servants to select the bodies of the strongest men, and ordered them to be raised to their feet again. The king approached one of the dead and gave him new life, and ordered the dead man to rise, and instilling in him that he will serve his master with this immortal body. When he reached the castle, the head of the castle asked what he saw. King Lich saw him and was surprised by his presence, because they thought that everyone had been wiped out. Moreover, King Lich didn't even feel him approach. How can he hide his traces of presence from me, who has the powers of an immortal? He is an immortal, the king asked. Deputy Cheon Wul Sung, 31 years have already passed since he came to see me last time, he asked the dead body. It's a law of nature that you die if you're weak. But why are his eyes open? Do you think you went to the other side unfairly? The head had already told him several times. Don't be afraid in the battle of the ranks, and don't seek to capture Murim, but start practicing. However, the deputy didn't heed the head's words, so he lost to some demons. The king ordered his servants to kill the leader. The attacking monsters did not yet know the power of the head. With a wave of his hand, he pushed the monster away and asked, "What kind of insect is this?" They kept attacking and attacking, but the leader was so strong, he started using his inner strength. And he said, "Damn bugs, if that's how you want to die, please." After defeating the monsters, he stopped and looked up at the sky. He was surprised at what he saw and asked if there were bats attacking the chapter. Their attacks became interesting to him. But the head was full of spirit, and he kept calling them lowly creatures. "Do you think you can compete with my school?" the head asked the demons. Using a small hand attack, he interrupted them all. King Lich saw this situation and organized a fight himself. The head saw him and asked him if he had finally found the courage to fight. Bony head, turns out you're a brave man, setting yourself up as the king of cold and death. His name is Rivers. He came to this world from the continent of Granada in the third dimension, pursuing the golden dragon, went beyond his change and arrived in this place unfamiliar to him, said King Lich. Hearing this, the head wondered what kind of brave man. Granada, what does he carry at all, he asked. The king praised the chapter and said that his skills in using darkness energy were incredible. However, such a mortal would still not be able to resist his army of immortals. Offered the head to become a servant of this body. He would have to accept his offer, and he would present him with the powers of the immortals, granting him sacred, eternal life. "What do you say, brave man? Do you agree?" King Lich asked. "So first you guys destroy my house, and then you sing about immortality?" asked the leader and laughed. Well, said the head, but first the head also wants to give something to the king." "What do you mean?" the king and the head asked. The king got angry and said, "Since he doesn't accept my offer." The king was very sorry and said that such strong men rarely survive. The head clenched his fists and told the king that the gift would be fast, so take it properly. Then the king will give the head a chance to die painlessly by his hand. He attacked the head without thinking, but the head broke his jaw with a swing of his arm. One punch and he's already down, and he forgets he's immortal. "I can't believe such a worthless guy killed everyone here." Suddenly, the king came to his senses and called the head an impertinent man. He wondered how he had survived such a blow. The king didn't hesitate long before he went into battle. Using his full power, He used the magic of hellfire. In the end, the brave man was killed by his own stupidity. The king's servant came to ask what King Lich's further instructions were. The king said it was a waste of time. Our business here is finished. Prepare to depart. The servant quickly went to do the Lich King's errands, but suddenly the leader shouted to the Lich King, saying that he was wondering how some bony parasite could use the fire of destruction. The Lich King at him, how did he stay in one piece after taking such damage? Calling the head a creep and threatening that he would definitely wipe him out this time. Fighting each other, no one gave up. The king kept calling the head a bastard, and finally used the power of reverse gravity. The head was surprised at this ability, and asked what it was. The king smilingly told him to move freely, and the head used the power of reversal without thinking for a long time. The king laughed and called him a dumb-headed idiot and ordered him to die. The head couldn't take it anymore, and used extremely harsh energy. The king wondered what he'd come up with. When he directed the energy at the king, they were both thrown in different directions. When he came to the rock, his face was bloody. He was grieved that Chukwema had bound him hand and foot. The head, seeing him in front of him, couldn't believe that he, an indestructible creature, had to fight hard in this dimension. And what's more, against some human, it's impossible. A mere mortal has the nerve to challenge the king. Whatever it takes, the king will destroy you with his own hands. Seeing the king, the head couldn't believe how he still had so much strength. It was already hard for the king to move. The head restrained his chest and felt that his energy pathways had been neutralized. He was even able to dodge the head's attack. With normal techniques, he couldn't be defeated, he thought. So far the technique isn't perfect, but right now there's nothing left for him to do but use it in battle. It's about the energy of the liberated Big Bear absorbing all the energy of the chapter. The king recognized that the head of an inferior living being, you can fight such a king equally. However, he still came to an end. The head, hearing those words, told him that his mouth couldn't shut. If that's the case, then don't delay and attack first. The head will be able to fight back with all the strength he has. The king told the head in return not to regret what he had said. And attacking him, he used the magic of the meteorite bracelet. Seeing this ring, the chapter was surprised at its largeness. Fucking monster, the head didn't think this thing was that big. Being right in front of the head's nose, it seems even bigger. If the head had known it would be like this, he would have come here after recovering his internal energy. But the head had not reached the level of a sacred demon yet. He asked himself when he would have to face such a thing again in this life. He would fulfill his desire to rise to the sacred demon in the next life, and without a second thought, I went into battle. It was a fight to the death. None of them wanted to retreat, even if they had no strength left. During the battle, a stranger was walking in the forest. Looking up into the sky, he saw a lunar eclipse. Suddenly the mana of the moon disappeared. Suddenly people with spears ran out of the bushes and pointed them at the stranger. The stranger was frightened and asked who was here. Suddenly they asked the stranger, pointing their spears at her. Where is she from, and what is she doing here alone? Watching them, the stranger thought they were so agile even without the use of magic. They must be human. And suddenly one of them told her to reveal her identity. From the forest she saw a girl. She approached the soldiers and asked what was going on. The soldier replied that a suspicious person was wandering the area and we had captured her. Yes, she asked? Then let me talk to her, said the girl. But the soldier was worried about the girl. But the girl told him it was okay and ordered him to step aside. The girl approached the non-significant person and said, your appearance suggests that you are not lost here. Who are you and what are you doing in this place? And can you speak? The girl asked. The stranger raised her hand and the soldiers all got scared, and one of the soldiers told the girl it was very dangerous to move away. But the girl looked at her and said, it's okay, put your weapons down. Putting her hand on the girl's head, she used magic. But the soldiers were frightened and asked the girl if she was okay. Suddenly the stranger spoke and said it was a pleasure to meet her. She came from another dimension. Did the girl ask from another dimension? So she was the one who caused all this chaos. When the stranger heard the girl's words, she immediately said that it was not her doing. The stranger said that she had opened the door through the dimension, but to hide from him she had come to this place. The girl with surprised eyes asked from him who was it. The girl asked her if she could cooperate with them and help with the investigation. The stranger immediately agreed and said that she had a lot to tell them. What is your name? The stranger asked the girl. The stranger said her name was Legweather. Just call her by her first name, it's more comfortable. 140 years later we see a bloody battle between a man and a monster. He is trying to save his child. While in the monster's claws, he yells to Han to rather run away from here. As long as his father buys him some time. Han froze, but his father tried to reason with him and shouted at him, Li Han, why are you standing there? I told you to leave quickly. Li Han was frozen in fear at what he saw. Asking his father, where's Mom? What's going on here? After starting to run, the monster immediately rushed after him. With tears in his eyes, Li Han tried to run faster and faster. But he thought the best idea was to hide somewhere. Suddenly he doesn't notice a root under his feet, and falls to the ground. Crying, he shouts to the monster not to come any closer. But suddenly he drew his sword and chopped off the gargoyle's finger. He was very happy that his sword had worked against the gargoyle. Wasn't it said that even the 3 warriors of Kanko would find it hard to resist this creature? But Han, just a second-year student of the Martial Arts Academy, was able to strike the gargoyle. Standing in Han's stance, there's no place to run. And shouting to the monster he said, attack, damn demon, there's nowhere to go. Han said he would just do as he had been taught at the academy if he didn't make a mistake. The academy said to shift the weight of A to the left foot while maintaining balance in the stance. Attacking the monster he used the sword technique Boundless Sky 7th movement, leaving no trace. But the monster got him in its attack. After being hit by the gargoyle, he came to his senses. In his head, remembering the blow that leaves no trace, he said that he should not have shifted his body weight to the left side, but directed all his strength to the right side to make an attack. He, a second-year student of the Martial Arts Academy, would not be able to defeat the gargoyle from the start, he thought in his head. Han didn't even have the strength left to hold the blade with both hands. However, he must kill at least this thing. At least it alone. I will avenge my parents by all means with my own hands, said Han. He thanked his mother and father. Even if I have to die now, Han will only go to the other world together with this monster, he said. He clenched his teeth and said that the gargoyle would be his traveling companion to hell. But his anger was so fiery, you could see how bad he felt in his eyes. Suddenly Han was asked if he could hear him. Damn it, Han failed this time too, the voice asked. Raising his sword, he asked where the voice was coming from. But suddenly the voice said to him, judging by his reaction, he heard me. Have became furious and asked who was speaking? The voice ordered him to head back. Coming across a shallow river, go down it, and you'll see a small hole. The voice ordered Han to run that way. If he wanted to escape from that thing, he should run now. But the gargoyle tried to kill Han, but he escaped. When he turned back, he saw no one and asked if he could get away. As he opened the portal with his hands, he fell, his body tearing apart, but at least Han had caught his breath. By the way, Han asked what the hell the voice was calling him here. Suddenly the voice told him to step aside. Han asked him again, who are you? Where do you call me from? Reaching the place, the voice told him that he had found it. Han was surprised and froze. The voice said he didn't look very lively. Han asked him how could he talk to such a body? But the voice told him such a thing as Kanem, you know. The voice said, don't be frightened, it's too early to die. Han couldn't believe it. He was, after all, at such a great distance, away from other people's eyes. What's behind Kanem, he thought? Could it be a demon? Even in the academy, they taught that among the strongest demons, some of which are unknown, there are incredibly ferocious creatures that deceive people in cunning ways and offer to make a good deal, instead of which the person begins to wish for death. The demon asked him, did he shit his pants? He's just a worthless creature. Is Han such a coward? The demon asked. Han got angry and told him not to pretend. The demon knows exactly what he's talking about. That creature is called a gargoyle. What does an immobile demon know anyway? Han asked. The demon asked him, what's a gargoyle? Which of the two behind your back are you talking about? Han heard the two and froze, surprised. Turning around, the Khan said that it couldn't be. It's a sure thing that absolutely indiscriminately tears to pieces anyone who invaded his territory. Han had heard that even the elders of the Kanko clans would have a hard time competing with him. What should he do now? Did the demon ask Han if he wanted revenge? Or had he decided to die at the clutches of such a beast? Is there any way, Han asked? By taking my hand. The demon will enter Han's body and destroy the monster. Han laughed and asked why he should trust a demon. Han seems to have no other choice. Han refused and said he'd rather die than let his body be stolen. Doesn't Khan want to avenge the deaths of his relatives? The demon asked. At hearing the question, Khan was surprised at how he knew about it. Understandably, Han was slightly taken aback. The demon could prove that these demons were nothing compared to him. However, there was no particular reason to give Han hope. By grabbing the hand, Han's body will become his and Han's soul will disappear. Two souls cannot coexist in the same physical body. But in return, he promises to avenge your parents, the demon said. Khan remembered his parents, and said his mom was frail and helpless, taking her own life. And my father sacrificed himself for me to the last heir. Why should Han's family have to go through something like this? Shouldn't it be demons who die, who commit such terrible atrocities? Han thought, but he was most angry with himself, and his cowardly escape. He said he would take revenge even if he had to give up his life, Han said. Han grabbed the demon's hand and asked, is that enough? The demon told him it was a wise choice. Now don't resist the incoming flow of energy into Han's body. Otherwise, both of our souls might be destroyed. Hong asked him to say his name one last time. And his name is Heavenly Demon. He turned out to be the 16th head of the Heavenly Demon Sacred School. He is the Heavenly Demon. When Han arrived in the other world, he met his father. It was just a memory that he began to dream about. He saw different moments of his life, how he got into the best academy in the country, how he was told to beware of monsters, how he learned the art of weapons, but those were just memories. Han said it would be necessary to scrutinize all his memories from his past life later. Suddenly, someone shouted at him to leave. When he saw the silhouette of Li Han's physical body, he chased after him, yelling at him to stop, as it were he couldn't just let him get away. A blow to his back hit him in a place he didn't understand. When he entered the other world, he saw a monster in front of him ready to tear him apart. He didn't know why his martial arts level sucked so bad. With fire, the monster showed its strength. But to Han, the creature seemed worthless and very weak. Attacking Han with fire, Han realized that Li Han's body wouldn't move the way he needed it to. But he still thought he could run one wider. But the monster kept attacking Han and blazing fire coming from behind. But Han kept dodging its attacks. With a blow to the head, Han felt something hard beneath his feet. When he looked at it, he thought he saw scales. Han said he dissipated the shock with his scales. The monster didn't react to Han's attack at all. Suddenly, Han's body began to tear apart violently. It was because of the demonic creature inside him. If his former body had been with him, once would have destroyed the monster with an energy strike. However, Li Han's body would definitely not be able to withstand such a thing. In Han's mind, he only had the thought of using any attack that could work against the monster. Seeing the sword under his feet, Han remembered that there was also this thing. Han mentally told Li Han that he hadn't even left a mark on the handle of the blade. While waiting for the monster to attack, Han called the monster a tenacious fiend. Han pondered what attacks he couldn't use in this fight. Turning around, Han used a sword attack, and told the fucking demon to try to withstand this attack. Clashing with the monster, Han threw some serious punches at the monster. Han was so strong that he subdued the monster for a while. After striking, Han felt that it was not enough. Another strike was needed. Using a triple sword attack, Han killed the monster by breaking its head in two. Examining the sword after the battle, Han thought it was a bit unfair. But one of his talents is sword wielding. Thinking of his blade as it was missing him now, he saw something unusual in the monster's mind. There was something sticking out of the monster's head. Han decided to see what it was. But what he found was a shining diamond-shaped object. Meanwhile, at the market, and we see a vendor selling his goods, telling people that the weapons were collected in the dungeon, but he guarantees the quality of the goods. It was a market where they tried everything they wanted. One of them tried tan leather, saying it was a special material. Some offered precious stones. Others incredible potions, reviving even the dead. All for 50 nannies. At the Huachuan hub, Suk Sam, the merchant, was as lively as ever. 10 years ago, he used to shop here too. It was a difficult time, but now this place brings back fond memories. He had been saving hard until today, And now he had finally opened his own store. Wasn't it wonderful, he asked himself? He called the department store by his own name, and was very proud of himself. After praising himself, suddenly some Han boy walked up. Suk Sam looked at him with a surprised look. He was reading the banner at the time, which he didn't understand, and he asked why would he even sell and buy such a thing. Hearing this, Suk Sam told him, "Welcome customer. This is Sok Sam's department store. We think of our customers first. Do you want to buy something?" Sok Sam asked the boy. Boy Han refused and said he wasn't here to shop, he wanted to sell something. Suk Sam was surprised and asked, "What exactly do you want to sell?" Khan replied, "Well, it's just a little thing." By the way, there were no items on the list that he wanted to sell. Suk Sam said, "Of course, this department store just opened." After looking at Han Suk Sam, he looked at him. He didn't even look 20 years old. His clothes were shabby, and he'd spoken to me on a first-name basis the first time I met him. Suk Sam offered to let him see his merchandise. Even with a glimpse of Han, it's clear that he's the type who knows absolutely nothing about the world. Suk Sam didn't even think about letting him inside the store. When he saw what Han gave him, he was surprised and said that it was the magic stone of a metal wyvern. He wondered how this boy could have such a unique item. Han saw Suk Sam's eyes and realized he knew what it was. Suk Sam suggested that they discuss his product over a cup of tea. Han agreed. Suk Sam was happy to hear his agreement. He suggested they go to the store. Last night, Han realized that these things were called monsters. If you use Li Han's memories to put the whole picture together. It's been 140 years since Han fought that bony head. Then Zhongyuan was infested by so-called monsters. An academy has even sprung up to fight them. However, something still remains beyond Han's comprehension. He can't believe that for the sake of the academy, all the clans and families started exchanging martial arts techniques. An unfortunate number of warriors had to give their own lives just to keep their secret books from being passed on to someone else. And now it's perfectly safe to exchange books with each other. There's only one answer. In those 100 years, something happened that Han couldn't understand. Remembering how the guys stalked him, he was told that he just memorized all the textbooks. That's why he got into the academy. But he had no skills at all. The teacher told them that unfortunately they were in the same class, and warned them to be prepared. When the semester starts, he'll kill half of them. Han said we'd leave useless memories aside. Isn't there a moment that would give him a clue? The basis of magic is simple, Han said. You draw a line from the second dimension to the third. When he saw the memories the girl was talking about, Han saw something in her that interested him. The girl was telling Han to watch carefully. By concentrating the magician in one point, fire can be created. When Han saw this, he said, "This girl is not human, a perfect mind, wise eyes. Such an incredible level of intelligence is not available to man." Han thought she had something to do with the type. But he had the most important things taken care of. He'd have to find out the rest in person. We're done with that for now. Han tried to restore his internal energy with the spiritual training of reverse blood circulation, but only the energy of 30 years could be restored. From such spiritual training, there can't be such a minor effect, pondering, said Han. If Han were to forcibly improve his skills, his body would simply not be able to withstand it. Maybe he should find a miracle pill somewhere and eat it, Han thought. Anyway, the problem is also Li Han's memories. Because Han forcefully invaded his body, some of the images from the past were lost. If I don't concentrate on his memory, nothing comes to mind right away. What do we have? Han thought. An incomplete memory, an unstable soul, and a body unsuitable for rapid skill improvement. A triple combo, in short. Han won't be able to defeat that type in the usual way, he thought. 140 years ago, Khan took the energy technique of a liberated big bear. It may not have been finished then, but it worked on the bony head. Remembering the fight and the lengths he had to go to when he saw his ability, it didn't seem like he was done with that type. However, he still managed to do some significant damage. This time will be different. I won't fall into Chuame's clutches again. Even though the situation is different now, Han will still fight him. Han thought he should meet that girl once. Something told him she was related to that Lich King. But of course, first let's look at how his beloved and precious world has changed in the meantime, said Khan. In Han's world, he was thanked at Sok Sam's store, and wished him a safe journey. And Sok Sam said to Han that if he found anything else, he should bring it to him. Han said he only sold 1 stone. And as he looked at the bag, he wondered where he should spend the money. It used to be so convenient. With a word or a gesture of the hand, he could get anything he wanted. He didn't even think about such worthless things as where and how to spend his money. But more importantly, the original owner of this body was a guy named Li Han. No matter how much Han dug into his memory, it looked like all he did was walk from the dormitory to the academy and study. What a bore, Han said. He didn't know anything about real life at all. What to do, Han thought. He was interested in the list taped to the store. What was that, he thought, a description of mercenaries. They were outstanding martial arts techniques, background and experience. What in the world is going on, Han thought. Usually Murametz hides 30% of his abilities. But here, people are advertising themselves openly. Let's see, Han said. He had 500 nannies of gold, and the average hired man needed about 300. He'll just hire a mercenary and leave the dusty work to him instead of doing it himself, he thought. Before choosing a mercenary, Han read their descriptions. But he didn't know which one to choose. But in a friend's shop called Warrior's Treasury, a man walked in. Someone shouted to Childok, "Accept the visitor." Childok shouted, "Yes, yes, I'm running." Childeok told Han, "You can come in." Suddenly, the stall grandfather said, "There's a new face in our establishment. I guess this is the first time you've seen the biography of our mercenaries. What class of mercenary does the grandfather ask?" This girl was the middleman of the mercenary warriors of Kuyem. "With us, the gentleman will be able to find a fighter that will satisfy all your question." "Despite your question, you are very generous," said Kuyem. "Let's talk seriously about the case." "Sit down," said Chuem to Han. Suddenly, Childok brought a tray of scrolls to Kuyem. Kuyem took one of them and said, "Let's see which mercenaries are available now." When he found one, he asked Han if this one was okay. "We have 3 of the most prominent mercenaries in our shop." Kuyem introduces each of them, starting with the left scroll, introducing the buyer of the first mercenary warrior. He graduated with honors from Heavenly Cloud Senior Academy. This is Wind Soul Fuang Hong. He has defeated 8 dark orcs, 2 gargoyles, and a chimera. His main weapon is his fists, but there are also words they say to their employers. The first mercenary is willing to be a force for the one who has none. Hearing the first mercenary's words, Han turned him down without thinking for a long time. Kuyem was surprised at Han's refusal, and said, "Then let's consider the next one." The second mercenary is the Overlord Song Gong. He ranked first in the Senior Academy Flying Dragon Senior Graduation rankings. He destroys his enemies with his dagger. Crush 4 trolls, 4 steel golems, and 2 vervain. Special offer contract for 6 months for only 320 nanny gold. His quote, "Life is a real fight." Han thought about Kuyem's proposal for a long time. But he offered to watch the third mercenary as well. This mercenary has destroyed countless gargoyles. He also slew a creepy dark knight and a wyvern. His skills are so impeccable that he only needs to enter the dungeon once. But for such high abilities, and the payment is 450 nanny gold for 15 days of hiring. He is a dark swordsman from the demonic school. Han was surprised and asked, "Demonic school? Are you talking about a dark swordsman?" asked Kuyem. "Yes, he is from the demonic school. A little over 100 years ago, this organization was extremely powerful. However, all of this is already in the past," said Kuyem. At the moment, the demonic school could be considered just a martial group whose members have a rather fiery temper. "Is it true?" Han asked. "Yes, of course it is," said Kuyem. "There are many strange rumors about the demon school, but they are all false." But it couldn't be recognized that the skills of the demonic school members were simply cancelled out. Kuyem had heard that they even had experience catching a high-ranked monster not listed in the Shanhai Jing. Anyway, the members of the demonic school didn't cause a riot, so the reputation is clean. But there are customers who are only looking for them. "Time seems to have changed a lot," Han said. In Li Han's memories, he doesn't see any hostile feelings towards the demonic school either. But the price for hiring demonic school members varies greatly depending on the terms and length of the contract. However, for the quality of their skills, Kuyem can guarantee with certainty. Han thought if he was going to hire any of them, he should pick the best one, and use him in a big way. Han looked at the mercenaries for a long time, but in the end he chose a mercenary from the demonic school. Kuyem asked Han to wait for a while. As Khan waited for his mercenary, he started to get nervous. He was starving to death, and he was sitting there drinking only water. The mercenary approached Han and said before introducing himself, "I would like to announce a few conditions that each of us must adhere to." The documents show this moment, but again, he only enters the dungeon once. He has no desire to waste his power. Our contract expires in 15 days. And no matter what situation the employer faces, it won't affect him. In exchange for 15 days, the mercenary is ready to fulfill your every request, to find a person or object that you wish, and similar requests. If there are any complaints, the contract can be cancelled right now, said the Dark Swordsman. The Dark Swordsman told Han that the compensation for breach of contract is void. Your mistake will be if you have not read all the details of the contract. Han asked him what other annulment of contract. Throwing him a sack of money, Han said, "In the sack is 500 nan gold, 450 to you and the remaining 50 to the stockbroker." It's been 5 days since the concept of the mercenary. Han heard some sounds and came out, saw the Dark Swordsman and asked him, "Who is he killing or caught a dragon?" Han saw him doing what he was doing and said, Okay, I won't interfere, but can't you go faster?" Han said. "I'm not going to get in the way," he said, telling the Dark Swordsman to hurry up. Han's stomach would soon rot without food. The Dark Swordsman was not happy with his job, and judged what the hell could it be called a job? Since Dark Swordsman went to Kanho and started working as a mercenary, he hadn't had a single failed mission under his belt. He was a monster hunter and a protector. In short, he did the work of a professional assassin, and successfully completed all those brutal, horrible missions. And Han woke up asking for food. He was resentful that he wasn't doing his job. All he was doing was cooking food. Food that would go in that idiot Han's mouth. He couldn't sully the name of the Heavenly Demon's sacred school with such a worthless need. He simply couldn't say Dark Swordsman. But what mercenary would refuse such a large sum of money? If that asshole hadn't been his employer, the Dark Swordsman would have killed him 100 years ago. Suddenly, Han asked the Dark Swordsman, did he fall asleep in there? Emboldening himself by saying that he should keep his face. That's 500 nan gold. A chance like this doesn't come along every day. For the sake of rebuilding the Heavenly Demon's sacred school, this opportunity should never be missed. There are only 9 days left. The Dark Swordsman has a few things to keep in mind. Even now at this moment, the clock is ticking. And the days go on and on. But the Dark Swordsman only waited for the last day to leave. After eating, Han told Dark Swordsman that he gave him 5 points for eating, and called him a good man. Guess he wasn't wrong to hire you. But Han left, and told him that he would do the rest of the day's cooking too. The Dark Swordsman was angry when he heard Han's instructions. After saying goodbye, Han said that until he called him, the Dark Swordsman should not enter the room. But the Dark Swordsman couldn't resist asking Han when the real work would be done. Washing the dishes, Dark Swordsman told his employer to remember, even at the moment when he can, this stupid dishes time then runs. Burrowing into the room, Han tried to regain his strength, but apparently that was the limit. If he kept trying, he would simply tear his energy pathways. After all, he had only recently regained 60 years of energy. One should stop there. But there has to be another way that we can now expand the space for inner energy. Han thought of trying the demonic sky and precious clouds technique. But no, the consequences were high. If he couldn't catch the energy flow, he would just pass out and roll away to the other world. What about demonic lightning, thought Han. If lightning travels all over his body, the path for energy flows can be freed up. Yes, Khan said that, but it's just as likely that he could move before he even faints. And in the end, all that's left to do is find and eat natural miracle pills. Like stone milk of purity or 10,000-year-old snow ginseng. There is only a small problem, for their cost can build a whole city. And even if there is such money, still darn find these pills, said Han with a sad face. Entering Li Han's memories, he asked if there was anything useful in his memories. He's sure that at least one of those very monsters has an Eden. Seeing the threat level memory, Han thought, what the hell is this? Han was curious, and opened this memory. After an incident that happened 140 years ago, all sorts of monsters started crawling out of a place called the dungeon. At first, they were mostly rather small and lacking in intelligence. However, over time, the monsters were heavily modified and became intelligent. In order to contain the ever-increasing and growing monsters, based on their strength, humans came up with a scale divided into levels. This became known as the threat level. Just as martial arts levels have a wall that can't be overcome, monster threat levels have the exact same limit. The weakest monster has a threat level of 1. The stronger the monster, the higher the threat level it is assigned. But the highest threat level is 9. I see, Han said. So we just need to find the memories of some high-threat monster. Let's see what we have here, Han said, holding his head up. When Han met the monster in his memories, he said that the monster looked sinister. But who is it? Han wondered. And Han asked, isn't his name Necromancer? It also has a bony head and looks just like that donkey. I guess Li Han has no memory of any other high-threat monsters. Let's find out more about this Necromancer. So said Han, let's take a look at him. When Han opened the information on the Necromancer, he saw that the text had been cut off in some places. Li Han must have been slacking off in his studies. Or the memories had been partially erased. Well, at least I'll get a look at what I got, said Han. Let's see if he has the power to control the dead, shall we? The Necromancer's body contains the core that sustains life. This Necromancer uses the mana core as the basis for black magic. A living person has magic. Perhaps there is a miracle pill in this beast, Han thought. I guess it doesn't matter if he's a lowly creature or an immortal creature. If there's something inside him, it's definitely going to be Neden. Seeing in the memories in the fourth to last monstrosity class, Han heard the question, what is a Necromancer? But he would have to stop by the academy to find out all about a Necromancer. But he was already going to stop by the academy once to meet that girl. But he ended up with another reason to go. Han stopped going through Li Han's memories. After all, he'd be seeing that guy soon anyway. But he wondered how strong this Necromancer was. Han thought that he needed to temper Li Han's body as soon as possible. So the plan was for him to have a sleepless night of training tonight. The next day, Han asked the mercenary if it was ready or not. The mercenary, even without caprice, was still going to serve food to Han. The mercenary set a table of 16 different dishes. He had excluded the appetizers that Han didn't like, so eat with pleasure, the mercenary said. Han squinted his face in displeasure. The mercenary asked him if something was wrong. Han said no meat. But the mercenary said that there were no ingredients that Khan would like today. But Khan stood his ground and said that such an argument did not justify the lack of meat. Han's eyes bulged when he smelled it. Has it finally come to you? The mercenary asked. I think you can guess that it's duck soup. It is cooked over a fire in a pot in the kitchen. In order for the duck's skin to be soft, it takes strict adherence to the recipe and preparation, said mercenary. Han scratched his head in surprise. He didn't think he'd made such progress in 5 days. The mercenary said with a smile that he'd never disappointed his employers before. Han couldn't believe he'd found out what kind of food Han wanted, and Han said he looked forward to his continued progress. The mercenary didn't notice that he had become like him, being with this sloth. He thought that this Han had involved him in all this, that he had also taken over his mind. What the hell, the mercenary thought. Did he really have such a plan from the beginning? The mercenary was the most prominent of the followers of the demonic school that had been destroyed more than 100 years ago. The mercenary wondered what he had done in the past 5 days for 450 nannies. After all, he hadn't done a single meaningful job during that time. After all he did was chow down, stagger to the grocery store, and chow down on that bum Han again. The mercenary asked me if it was normal for the guy who hired him for 450 nanny gold not to give him any missions. But assuming that his plan was to get close to me, then he had succeeded. The mercenary makes it clear that his employer is a secret scout for the enemies he's killed. And it turns out at the end of our contract, he's gonna sneak up on him and slit the mercenary's throat. Suddenly Han asked the mercenary if he knew a type called a necromancer. The mercenary was surprised and asked him if he meant the creature that summoned zombies and skeletons. Khan asked the mercenary if he was strong. But the mercenary must have realized his plan and decided to play along with Khan. And the mercenary asked Han why Han suddenly asked about him. The mercenary told Han if he was up to something stupid, he'd better hold his horses. There's no way a commoner like Han would like us with a threat level 9 monster. The mercenary said it would take quite a bit of time and preparation to catch him, but the mercenary is afraid the contract will end before he crushes him. Khan asks him, why on earth would you want to catch him? But the mercenary did not expect such a counter-question from Han. He said, you hired me to do this, which makes sense. Who will make the food then? Han asked. The mercenary couldn't take it anymore and lost his temper and said, to hell with this fucking food, employer. Khan couldn't stand it any longer and offered Khan a taste of soup boiled to perfection with soft duck meat. The mercenary calmed down and mopped up his joint with food. After all, he knew Han was obsessed with good food. However, the mercenary must not let his guard down so as not to arouse any suspicion. Han remembered the form he had to fill out. But he would let the mercenary fill it out. The next day, Ian came to the Heaven Warrior Academy. Upon entering the administration office, he was greeted by the head Kuyung. Opening the characterization, Kuyung was surprised. He couldn't believe that the student was from a demonic school. Kuyung asked his subordinate if the student had said anything, or if he had any requirements, for example. The subordinate replied that he didn't know. He just handed over the application and went to the counseling room. Kuyung said just by looking at his work experience, it's clear that he's head and shoulders above the other students. But I can't believe he managed to catch a threat level 7 Dark Knight. As far as we know, the Dark Swordsman captured an inferior Dark Knight. He didn't have a skeleton horse with him. Moreover, the Dark Swordsman is in the company of talented warriors. That's why Kuyung thinks he's lucky enough to destroy the Dark Knight. No matter how Kuyung said it, a Dark Knight is a Dark Knight. Even the fourth-year students in our academy won't be able to suppress him. What did the instructors say on his account? Kuyung asked. The subordinate said that there was one more vote in favor. After all, there was a bloody threat looming, so it was decided to rank the students according to how favorable they were to the academy. What about the readings against? Asked Kuyung. No matter how you look at it, this organization is a demonic school. The Dark Swordsman is the first to enroll with us, answered the subordinate. Even though there was an alliance with Sa's plan? Asked Kuyung. The subordinate answered yes, everyone was in agreement. An agreement between the Zhong and Sa clans. A girl named Weather was the one who made the agreement. The terms of the agreement were to fight on the same front line against the monsters. Immediately after that, each party to the treaty received magical power from the Weather Leagues. Academies were established and Zhongyuan stopped receiving damage from monsters. However, there is no changing the fact that the period of enmity between the Sa and Zhong clans was much longer than the period of their alliance. We shouldn't forget that. What do you think? Kuyung asked his subordinate. He said that he would like to be accepted into our academy. After all, you can't have a Dark Swordsman become a student at another academy. Then we'll accept him as a student from today, said Kuyung. Where is he now? Kuyung asked. The subordinate stopped Kuyung and said that the boy had not come alone, but with his subordinate. This Dark Swordsman's guardian is a sophomore at our academy. His power is making itself felt. It had been 6 days since he'd hired the mercenary. Han measured his uniform, but it looked more rustic than he'd expected. The mercenary standing at the door told me that my dear employer had asked me to buy this uniform, and 2 pairs. By the way, why do you need a uniform? The mercenary asked. Han said so clearly. You have to wear it to go to the academy. To the academy? The mercenary asked. But why do you want to go there? The mercenary asked. Why do you want to go there? Han replied. Because there was something interesting for him there. You didn't answer normally, Han. The academy uniform, what does that mean? The mercenary asked. Han threw the uniform to the mercenary and said he was giving it to him. I hope it's not what he thinks it is. That's what Han said. You're going along for the ride? Why the hell did the mercenary ask, pissed off? Khan accepted his anger and said if he didn't want to, don't then. However, the mercenary's biography will be difficult to put up soon. Smiling, Han said, if anything goes wrong, he can get his 450 nen gold back. Think carefully, mercenary. And HPN left. The mercenary thought of his precious 450 nannies. The ones destined to rebuild the Heaven Demon's great holy school, for he needed them urgently. Wishing his employer well, he should keep that thought in his head. And in the meantime, the clock is ticking. When he accepted the employer's offer, he calculated that in about 15 minutes he would exhale 240 times, In 2 hours he would exhale about 19-20 times. And for the remaining 9 days of the contract 207,360 times. So he has to count from the figure 207350. While Han did push-ups, the mercenary's anger toward him flared. He thought it would be better to spend the last few days of the contract wasting his energy, and just hold on to his money. The mercenary thought about it, and said it was decided that even if he got kicked out of the mercenary shop, he would buy Khan. But a friend came in and apologized for the delay. He was the deputy head of the administration department. He introduced himself as Lee Jun-gu. You must have been waiting for him, asked Lee Jun. Let's get to the training right now. At that time, Khan was showing his firm muscles to the mercenary. In his mind, the mercenary wanted to eat Han to pieces. Seeing this, Lee Jun wondered what the two were doing here. The leader wondered who was the dark swordsman. He looked at Han and said with certainty that it wasn't him. Then the dark swordsman is the guy sitting on the couch. When he approached the mercenary, Lee Jun asked if he was a dark swordsman. The mercenary didn't think for a long time and asked what if he was. How could it be? You are the one who applied to join the Heavenly Warrior Academy, asked Lee Jun. After all, he was determined to be in the 4th year in the 4th grade. Telling the mercenary to follow him. When Han heard that, he was surprised. So our mercenary is a 4-year-old. He's 2 grades above Han. The mercenary calmed his inner anger, saying that a fortune was at stake. If the mercenary is quieter than water and lower than grass, Han's property will be his. That is what will be the real death blow to him. Han, seeing the smile of the mercenary, said that he was strange. At first he was displeased and now he was laughing and said that they would meet at the gate of the academy as soon as the 4th lesson was over. After stopping the teacher, Khan asked him where the 3rd class of the 2nd year was. But the teacher told him to address him respectfully. If he were your teacher, he would have lowered Han's grades for behavior. Since he is a student, he should keep the rules of etiquette at least to adults, said the teacher to Han. Han understood him. He immediately had the feeling that he was really living a new life. He immediately apologized for impolitely addressing the teacher. The teacher said it nicely. The 3rd grade 2nd year class is in the neighboring building on the 7th floor. Seeing Han's behavior, the mercenary decided that he was by nature a blowhard. He immediately told the teacher to take him to class. Han felt funny and decided it was pointless. He had only changed his body, but everything around him was different. 140 years ago, he would have considered this whole situation completely absurd. Then he simply didn't need to go to the academy. But now he didn't want to give up everything. There were so many new things he discovered in his life. It would be at least useful to attend a class to get used to the new body. Coming to the neighboring building, he was surprised at the sight. He was even inspired to go to the academy. He was already pleased that the building wasn't destroyed like the main headquarters of the demonic school. He remembered his teacher telling him to go to the 7th floor. As he stood in front of the door, he heard the teacher ask how they had been living all this time. First, he congratulated everyone on the completion of the 1st year, and the transition to the 2nd year. He saw new faces in the class and decided to introduce himself. His name was Cho Jak-sang. He's a weapons instructor. His lessons would be boring, but in practice, he said to listen carefully. That was the end of his introduction. Since today is their first day of school, let's go through the list quickly, the teacher said. Without thinking for a long time, Han opened the door with his foot. The students were all frightened by what had happened. They thought it was as if someone had taken the door away. The teacher was furious at what had happened and asked Han what was wrong. Han came in and asked if it was the 3rd grade of the 2nd year. The teacher asked with an angry look why he was kicking down the door out of nowhere. Who the hell is he? Without thinking, Han replied that he was him. Love and admiration, gloomy red head. Han asked the teacher enough? And slowly went to sit down in his seat. The teacher was angry and shouted at him to stop. But suddenly the teacher was called by the deputy for a moment. Before he sat down, Han started to resent the table. Then he didn't like the guys because they looked small. But one of the students was already mad at him. He looked at Han and called him a freak. He's on his first day at the academy, and he's already standing out like a freak, though he probably hadn't gotten his dawn in a while. Calling Han a fucking freak and promising to make his life hell while he was at the academy. What are you going to do? Murin asked himself. He can't just leave it alone. It's not like he's crazy enough to leave it alone. Of course, Murin has a plan in his head. But his roommate advised him to teach him only a verbal lesson. As long as the teacher is around, we'll sit quietly. But suddenly the deputy asked the teacher to take Han to the roof. Teacher said of course. After all, there's no better place for him to practice. Murin wondered how to attack him today. He laughed and said that this would be a fun year for him. The teacher wondered for a long time how such an impertinent man managed to get into the academy. But the fact that he brought a dark swordsman was true. The head of the administration department ordered Han to be watched. All eyes and ears fixed on the boy, said the deputy to the teacher. Try to make sure he follows the rules. If anything happens, be sure to report to us. He looked at the door and was surprised by the broken door. He apologized for interrupting and gave permission to continue the lesson. The teacher laughed and said it would be fixed. Han looked at his classmates and decided that they were all members of different families. There were even disciples from the Shaolin Temple. Wow, Han marveled. There are so many clans and families gathered in one place. After all, he remembered something from Li Han's memories, but it was still surprising to him, though there had been types before who didn't much care where he came from. I wonder if they're dead, Han thought. Who would have liked this era, Han thought. Suddenly someone asked if he was all right. Han looked at him and asked who he was. Without thinking for a long time, he said he was a friend from his class. He said Han was strange today. Is it really the Li Han he knows? The boy asked. It was Xiao Jin, Li Han's friend. Xiao Jin asked Han if he had any pain. When Han saw him, he realized he was Li Han's friend. He thought it would be a good idea for him to play along in order to have a peaceful life at the academy. Han laughed and called him a humorist. And said he was fine? As usual, he didn't say hello to you on the sword. Xiao Jin was surprised at his behavior and asked Han if they had ever had a sword bet. That you're not more than that, he realized. But you still don't look like yourself, Li Han said to his friend. Doesn't he look like himself? Li Han asked. Then how should he behave? He asked Xiao Jin. Xiao Jin wondered how he could even answer such a question. Suddenly, the teacher turned to Li Han. From now on, enter the office by opening the door instead of kicking it open. It's problematic to fix the door every time, said teacher Li Han. Han was confused and asked Xiao Jin what he should say to the teacher. Xiao Jin said that he should apologize and say that he would not do it again. Han apologized and said it was awkward. But he really thinks the person who put up the door should be kicked in the head as well. Of course the teacher doesn't know what your family taught you. He doesn't need to know. Li Han said, be nice to the instructors of the academy in a respectful manner, the teacher said. Han thought, and realized that it had been a long time since he had spoken to anyone in Yu. But he realized that he would be interested in this experience too. The teacher started the lesson, as he had said before, so that we would not forget that the ways of practical use of the sword has an infinite number of ways. So let's go through one more part and finish up, the teacher said. Suddenly the teacher asked a question to the girl. The girl introduced herself and heard a noise behind her. When she looked back, she saw Li Han asleep and became angry. Suddenly the teacher yelled at Li Han and said to you, young man, everything is already known this. What kind of behavior in class? Asked the teacher. Tell us all about the 3 types of chalchik, the teacher asked Han. And if you get the answer wrong, you'll get what you deserve. That sucker didn't like the teacher from the start. It's not enough, now he's snoring like a locomotive at the first class of the new semester. According to the rules of the academy, he will either have his behavior points reduced or be severely punished, said the teacher to Han. Han told the teacher on reflection that the question itself was already wrong. The teacher asked, what does he mean? The part so contains 2 meanings, namely tearing and cutting with a sword. Analyzing the word in this way, there are a total of 5 kinds of chalchik, answered Han. The first chakra allows you to overpower the enemy's blade. The second chalchik helps to block the enemy's attack by means of a penetrating attack. And the third sugamshik means taking a sword attack with a fist or palm. And the fourth is the palshik. By pressing on the ground, it deprives the opponent of breath. And the last 5th kind is the dancer, which can be used to chop an opponent's sword in half. That's why the chalchik species is not 3 but 5. I think Li Han's answer is correct enough. After looking at their classmates, They all looked at Li Han with surprised eyes. The teacher immediately asked Li Han how he knew all this. Of course, Polshchik and Danchik, they are there too, but these two methods are not learned in year 2. Li Han said that he was just answering the question asked. Was the answer wrong? He asked the teacher. No, replied the teacher. That's right, student Li Han. That's right, the finger man and the dancer. It doesn't say useful techniques in combat. However, our weapons class is all about theory. You will be taught real combat skills from the age of 4. And for students of 2 years, real combat can only hinder, the teacher told his students. Han said if this was a real lesson, he would have listened. As it was, he'd almost die of boredom. Suddenly, Sojin asked Han how he knew all this. Han offered to quickly end this necessary conversation and suggested that we go take a look around the academy. So Jang told Han that they didn't have time to go for a walk. There was nothing left until the next lesson. Suddenly, Murin told Li Han to wait. He ran in from behind and decided to attack Han. Before he could strike, Murin was defeated. Seeing this, Seo Jan was dumbfounded that Murin had been defeated with one hand. Murin, falling down, asked him who he was, but Murin didn't wait long to attack his opponent. He didn't understand why this defender was getting into other people's fights. He stood in front of Murin and asked him if he was ashamed of himself. He was in his 2nd year and still had no brains. The warrior came from behind. Semunyoung thinks that Murin is the only one in this class who will just stand idly by and watch the violence without reason. If Murin says you want to fight, let's have an official fight in front of the academy, Semunyoung suggested. If you don't care who your opponent is, Semunyoung said. Let's fight back Murin, shall we? Murin dispersed and said to Semunyoung to speak words to you that he can answer for. Fight or not fight, the outcome is obvious. So I suggest we don't waste time, Murin said. Murin gave Semunyoung's advice. If he didn't want to get into trouble, let him keep his big nose out of other people's business. Han asked Sojin who the guy was. Han wasn't aware of him. After all, he came 2nd in the rankings in his 1st year. He is one of the 5 geniuses, said Sojin. Seojin, look, the kindergarten class got so boring that the two of them decided to punch each other in the face. It's understandable though. What kind of idiot would even think of having a martial arts theory class? Look at what Seojin said. There's a picture of Baek Murin almost hitting you. And Semunyoung stopped him. Suddenly, someone stopped Li Han from behind. It was Semunyoung, and he asked Han if he hadn't been taught to say thank you. He didn't ask for a greeting with all the formalities, but he wanted to warn him about something. Semunyoung said that he has no prejudice against students who entered the academy through donations. However, there is no limit to Li Han's rude behavior in class. As it was correctly said, the Chalchik can be divided into 5 types. However, this was part of the vast knowledge not included in the lesson materials, said Semunyoung. Semunyoung said that Tanchik requires a lot of large-scale movements, so it is learned in a practical class. And learning Danchik requires good weapons and strong internal energy. Next time, Han, learn about the purpose and lesson plan first. And lastly, Han, controlling your fatigue is a basic foundation for a warrior. Sleep well at home, Han, said Semunyoung. Standing between them, Seojin sensed something strange between the two. He sensed that a conflict was brewing and decided to separate them. Seojin turned to Semunyoung and said that Li Han had already figured it out. So let's end all of this. Semunyoung asked him, since he had heard him, did he think of saying anything in response? After all, the other students all agreed with Semunyoung. Suddenly someone shouted at them, saying, "Hey you two!" It was that girl. She asked them to keep their tongues in a crazy place. Besides, what's the point of dwelling on the problem for so long since the second lesson had already started 7 minutes ago? It was Eun Seo-rin. She was the leader of the first year's rankings. Suddenly Han looked at her. She saw his gaze and asked why he was staring. If you'd like to clear the way. When Semunyoung left, he told Li Han that he had nothing against him. He just wants him to behave normally next time. Han asked Sojin if he saw the guy touch his shoulder and start lecturing him. Isn't it funny? Li Han said he couldn't believe that someone had put his hand on his shoulder. It was new to him because he had never felt it before, said Li Han. With joy, Li Han shouted a shocked peace. After all, this would never have happened in his life before. Seeing this, Seojin asked if he was okay. The next day the deputy came to the principal. He asked the deputy how things were going. The deputy said that the students from the demonic school were really something. You'll be impressed when you see it for yourself, said the deputy. The principal asked who else was in the 4th grade of the 4th year. The deputy said there were only 3 Yang Dae, Jang Woo and Nam Gung Ho. They are also strong fighters, but they are far from Nam Gung Ho, they don't come close. Perhaps if Dark Swordsman and Nam Gung Ho were to duel, the outcome would be fucking unpredictable. The director said no bad days. I think the deputy understood what the director was implying. The deputy told the head not to worry, as physical education instructor Nwe Cheon Beck was overseeing it. Even though it is sometimes difficult for the instructor to tear his seat from the chair, but he could not restrain his curiosity. Although it makes sense that Swordsman and Nam Gun Ho will soon have everyone's attention, said the director. The head said goodbye to the deputy and told him to tell him the result of the battle as it ended. In the arena of the training academy, there was a fight between Dark Swordsman and Nam Gung Ho. It was a fight to the death. Suddenly, someone asked Chug-young how the fight was going. It was our deputy. He said he curbed because he was at the head of the administration department. Looking at the arena, the deputy even saw an instructor that he wouldn't see at normal times. Chug-young said that it was probably because of the battle today, deputy. Looking at the tribune, the deputy couldn't believe his eyes. The duel between Nam Gung Ho and the Dark Swordsman was attracting so much interest. By the way, how is the fight itself now? Chug-young asked the deputy. As expected, there were 2 Deputy Nam Gung Ho and the Dark Swordsman left. 15 minutes had already passed since their fight started. Let's see how the Dark Swordsman uses the demonic power of the deputy was in school. I mean, just the sight of it. That kind of energy makes your throat tighten. Nam Gung Ho saw his strength and wondered how he could respond to such strong energy. But Nam Gung Ho's eyes were filled with fear that he didn't want to show. Seeing the flames on Nam Gung Ho's sword, the deputy was surprised. But Chug-young had heard that he had gotten Surt's sword. Who did he get the sword of Surt from? Asked the deputy. Listen, deputy, said Chug-young. A few months ago in the Anhui province area discovered a dungeon blazing with fire. And the raid on the dungeon was led by the Namgung family, and the commander-in-chief was Chief Namgung Namgung Ju. He is Namgung Ho's father. The master of the dungeon, the fire giant Surt, was eventually suppressed, but Chief Namgung was unable to stay alive after being seriously injured. But before he died, he gave the sword to the young heir, Namgung Ho. This one has a bound weapon, the sword of Surt. Sacred weapons? The Dark Swordsman asked. He didn't think he would see such a thing at the academy. He was lucky to have such a valuable sword, said the Dark Swordsman. Of course the Dark Swordsman is valuable, it's a family heirloom. But Namgung Ho hasn't picked it up recently, so he's not fluent with it yet. Since his opponent is a Dark Swordsman, there is no way to go without a sword of this level, said Namgung Ho. Hearing Namgung Ho's words, it was an honor for a Dark Swordsman to hear such a thing. It's good that Namgung Ho recognizes him as his opponent. But he doesn't think he can crush the Dark Swordsman with that blade. This time he finds it first. And if Namgung Ho uses fire energy, I will smear his energy with ice, said the Dark Swordsman. But along with the emergence of the dungeon, another event occurred. The event refers to the discovery of unusual items of sacred weapons for destroying monsters. But of course, monster hunting has shown that not all linked weapons are equally powerful. The larger the scale of the dungeon, the stronger the enemy, the more powerful weapons the warrior gets. However, if the warrior's ability is insufficient, even the armament in his hands will be unsupportable. Upon entering the fight, the Dark Swordsman attacked first, and used a demonic small arm attack. After hitting Namgung Ho's leg, he immobilized him. Namgung Ho was surprised that the Dark Swordsman could maintain the Lud's energy even though there were flames. Seeing this, Cho Jian couldn't believe that the Dark Swordsman didn't react to fire at all and calmly froze the ground. Namgung was terrified that at this rate he would soon be completely immobilized. Why is it so hard to get out, he thought. For the first time, the Dark Swordsman had met an opponent who was fun to fight. He thought it would be unseemly not to show his opponent his true abilities, he thought. Attacking his opponent, the Dark Swordsman ordered him not to relax. After all, the fight wasn't over yet. At that time, there was a class that Li Han was supposed to attend. But the teacher came into the classroom and said that they were going to study the concept of helping each other today. Seeing the empty seat, she asked Seo Jin if the student sitting next to him was walking somewhere. But Seo Jin looked the teacher in the eye and lied that Li Han had a stomach ache and went to the nurse's station. But suddenly Seo Jin was approached by Mu Ren and asked why he lied. After all, Mu Ren had gone to the nurse's station to get medicine before class, and he hadn't met Li Han on his way back. Mu Ren was angry, but that was the only good thing he heard all day. After all, he still had some business to take care of with that asshole. But now he wouldn't have to bother looking for it. Calling Seo Jin a bespectacled guy, he told Seo Jin to take them to his friend's place. At that time, Li Han was lying on the roof of the main building of the academy. The weather was 5 degrees. But Li Han kept falling asleep. He thought it must be because he was in a child's body. Sitting on the rooftop, Li Han felt that his internal energy was no longer accumulating. But so far, he was only able to increase it by 1.5 captures. Only he had used the reverse blood circulation technique in vain. If Li Han had known this would happen, he would have practiced some other breathing exercise. Even though he had almost reached the level of a bound demon in his past life, there were a few necessary conditions for him to reach the level of an escaped demon with his current body. The first condition, which requires a lot of realization time. But every person reaches a certain level of martial arts in a different way, so it is necessary to find the best way to realize it, Han reasoned. Since he was now in Li Han's body, it was impossible to raise the level using the past realization technique. The second condition is the internal energy of the body. The accumulation of internal energy requires patience, time, and endless training. Right now, the amount of his internal energy is 3 captures. But if he continues with his usual breathing exercises, it will take him at least a year to get to the next level. And to reach level escape demon requires an amount of internal energy greater than 7 captcha. But all of this would take 2.5 years. He spent too much time using the normal methods. But it's possible to shorten the time. But he had assumed that there were no other options besides this necromancer. Han hoped with all his heart that the necromancer would be a big shot. All he has to do is get his hands on Neden. Seeing the fight between the Dark Swordsman and his rival, Han started piling on and saying that he hadn't had time to enroll yet, and he was already all over the battlefield. And the fight went on and on. Namgu couldn't find a moment to attack. The Dark Swordsman kept attacking him. Namgung's mistake was letting the Dark Swordsman use that technique. He felt that he had a difficult opponent for him. After all, he barely had the strength to deflect his blows. Attacking him once more, the Dark Swordsman asked Namgu, did he really think he could crush him with his sword? But no one thought it would turn out this way. With a sword strike, the Dark Swordsman broke his steel blade in 2. Namgung responded by saying that this was the first time his sword met flame. Is this dark flame also one of the abilities of your blade? Namgung asked. It can be used to unleash the most powerful fire. But since the Dark Swordsman's sword is broken, how about deciding the victory with neighboring strikes? Asked Namgung Ho. Looking at Namgung, the Dark Swordsman said, amused. It had been a long time since such a strong fighting spirit had awakened in him. Dark Swordsman asked, your name is Namgun Ho, right? After all, the Dark Swordsman had heard that the Namgun family was considered the rulers of Anhui province. So the rumors were not false, said Dark Swordsman. After all, he had almost forgotten what a Murim was. Thanks for reminding me, the Dark Swordsman said. However, Namgung was sorry that he wouldn't be able to have any more fun. Let's put an end to this, the Dark Swordsman shouted. Clashing in a fierce battle, both opponents struck. The spectators were surprised by such a fight. It was unbelievable that he was able to repel such an attack. Namgung was surprised. The Dark Swordsman asked Namgung what he should do. Are you going to fight anymore? He asked. The Dark Swordsman, sitting down on his knees, said, enough. And the position is his. But Namgung said that, to be fair, it was a tie. Because he was able to beat him not with his skills, but with his sacred weapon. The Dark Swordsman, accepting defeat, said it was no excuse. What is admitted must be admitted. Because good weapons are also a part of skill. As he left, the Dark Swordsman only wanted to know what his sword was called, he asked. Namgu looked at him and said it was Surt's sword. As he left the arena, the Dark Swordsman met his employer and asked him what he was doing here. By the way, mercenary, that was a great fight. Turns out you're not bad, said Li Han to the mercenary. The Dark Swordsman, walking away in his head, called him an underdog. he decided the better solution would be to just ignore him. Suddenly, Han asked him about that technique. After all, it was a demonic small arm attack, right, mercenary? The mercenary was surprised at his question, for he thought him stupid. And he asked how the hirer knew this attack. He's not even from the demonic school. How did he know about this technique? The mercenary asked Han. The demonic small hand attack is a technique by which a warrior can freeze his opponent by summoning cold energy. Once upon a time, after all, the demonic small arm attack was one of the secret techniques that brought glory to the demonic school. However, 140 years ago, the heavenly demon's sacred school was completely destroyed and the inheritance of most of the secret techniques ceased. Therefore, the demonic attacks are currently unknown to the people of Kanho. But how would some minnows for hire know about it? The Dark Swordsman wondered. Even after all, the instructors and their assistants who were in charge of Pima's fighting behavior were unable to recognize the Dark Swordsman's technique. Yeah, I heard that somewhere, said Li Han. And what did it matter now? After all, the mercenary, whom Han had found and invested his fortune in, had just been beaten like a punching bag. The mercenary was very angry at Han's words. And in his defense he said that he didn't want to fight with all his strength on Pima. Bygones, said the Dark Swordsman. After all, he is interested in other things. You are not even from the demonic school. So how did you know about the demonic attack of the small hand? Swordsman asked. With a thumbs up, Han said, let's do this. The mercenary extends my contract for another month. Nikinik was furious, and said he was out of his mind. The mercenary told Han to know his measure. How could someone who happened to hear about the demonic small arm technique make such a suggestion to the warrior? Asked the Dark Swordsman. Because no matter how much he thinks about it, there's no way to extend the contract. Let me suggest an alternative, employer. You see that vessel the mercenary held out? Inside it is a seasoning that has been handed down in the school for generations, with these spices for the remainder of the contract. He'll cook you a dish he's never tasted before. So the mercenary has been hiding such condiments all along, says Khan. The mercenary said there was no mention of them in the contract. When Han heard this, he agreed and said they would make a verbal contract for the spices. Han said he would tell them about the demonic attack of the small hand, through the acupuncture point of the palm of his hand. Namnik said stop. They can hear them here and suggested a change of location. Khan says that's enough. He can't wait for the fucker with his secret condiments. Namnik thought he'd been clear about the basics and levels of demonic small arm attack. I can't believe you'd overhear all that. He seems to have something to do with the demonic school, Namnik said. Han said there was no such clause in their verbal contract. If he's interested, then we renew the contract. Namnik said to shut up. He wondered how the hell Han knew about the demon school's legacy. He couldn't believe that this brat was on the same level as him, who had been doing his job for the demon school until now. Han thought he'd have to ask the Dark Blood commander about it once. Maybe there were still descendants. The Khan turned to his Nemnik. Why did his last attack fail? Isn't the reason interesting? Han asked. Why? The mercenary asked. First of all, the demonic small arm attack is a technique based on sound energy. So when this energy is used by girls who possess sound energy, the demonic small arm attack can show its full power, said Han. For men, the same correlation works, said Khan. When your gender and technique are at opposite poles, it's hard to see the real effect of an attack. Since he is male, to fully master the demonic small arm attack he needs to reach level 9 or higher. Secondly, you were hampered by not reacting properly to your opponent's attack. He doesn't mean he doesn't use ice energy skillfully. The point is that fire must be suppressed by fire. Suppress fire with fire? The man asked. If the demonic attack of the small hand refers to yin techniques, then there are also yang techniques, said Han. For example, the demonic attack of the bloody hand, said Han. Namnik recoiled and wondered how he knew about the demonic attack of the bloody hand. But Namnik has no idea how he learned of this technique. But his opponent used copper with a very powerful flame. If in the same situation he also used fire, it would be a fight to see whose flame was bigger than the one, the dummy said. But the demonic attack of the bloody hand is not just a technique containing flames. If the technique is honed to perfection, it will reach a state of unbreakable water and fire, Han said confidently. Fighting fire that uses the energy of fire is a pain in the ass. But if you block the energy of fire, everything becomes much easier. All that's left is the ability to wield the sword correctly, Han told his captor. Judging by your skills, Han is sure he can do it. Namnik thought that getting used to the idea fire technique would come naturally through training. Han asked, is he trying to say he doesn't possess the demonic attack of the bloody hand? Looks like Han got it right. So the mercenary's demonic small arm attack is only half mastered, and he hasn't studied the demonic blood arm attack at all. Han asked if the mercenary wanted to talk about the bloody hand attack. But their contract will have to be extended for a month. What do you say? Han asked. The mercenary answered Han, no way. Han asked the mercenary if there was any reason to doubt. If you don't trust him, you'll have to make the mercenary start to trust Han. Han told the mercenary that he could make a decision afterward, but first he should see what Han had written. The mercenary took the torn Varatnik in his hands and asked, what is this? Consider, mercenary, what a preview. This is the kugel of the initial stage of the demonic attack of the small arm. The mercenary couldn't believe his eyes. Not interested in what came next, asked Han. It would be perfect if the mercenary would agree to another month's contract. The mercenaries took his time and told Han he had to think about it. The mercenaries hurriedly told Han that he should think about it. Khan said that even if some of the seniors from his school survived, it was no different from total extermination. Although Han thought, if you think about it that way, you can't be surprised. He's living in a world inhabited by monsters, and the Chonisa clans have formed an alliance to deal with those monsters. Moreover, the demonic school was destroyed at the hands of a single underdog named Lich King. For those who originally lived in this time, such a world would not seem strange. Mu-Rin saw Han on the roof and asked him how he knew to come up here, calling him a goat. He had just sent the four-eyed man to find him. I mean, we have such a strong friendship, you can't help but admire it. Let's get started before your boyfriend gets here. Turning to Han, he asks if he loves all things that are consistent with logic and reasonableness. After all, Mu-Rin can see that Han does. However, listen to this. This school accepts people who don't belong here. And they don't do it through ability, but through money and connections, Mu-Rin said. Mu-Rin said he was sick of people like that. Especially scum like him who donated to the academy. Han thought about what he was talking about, the connections, the donations. But suddenly his father came to him from the inside. He said he had a plan. His father told Han that he knows a master who has connections at the Heavenly Warrior Academy. Don't worry, my son has a good memory. A lot of people want to join this academy even for a lot of money, so try your best, father told Han. Now Han understood what was going on. So Li Han was hated because he had entered the academy through a donation. What a childish reason, Han thought. Times change, but worthless assholes don't disappear. Mu-Ren's friends assumed that their punching bag had crapped his pants. One of them said not to scare Han so much, or he'd call his parents for help. Mu-Ren asked Li Han if he felt bad when they insulted his parents. They said he was a scumbag who got into the academy by proxy. He must have felt uncomfortable after being insulted like that, Mu-Ren asked. Mu-Ren was surprised, because before, Li Han would have attacked him like a man. Suddenly Han was man enough to ask him what he was doing. Mu-Ren was surprised by the question. I'm going to hit you. If you continue to just act brave, you'll get bored. How about you take a stand, Li Han said Mu-Ren. In return, Mu-Ren will let you try to hit him first. What do you think? Mu-Ren asked. Han stood up and said he didn't care who went first. Can you take a punch? Han asked. Look at him, he's worried about me. Go ahead and attack, puppy said Mu-Ren. Okay Mu-Ren, I won't talk long then. Mu-Ren said in his thoughts that Han had lost his mind. I can't figure out what kind of toilet his logic and rationality has been flushed down. But I'll have to correct his ill-mannered behavior today. Mu-Ren shouted to Han that if he could beat him, let him try. Because of his outward vigor, his fist would split in two. But Mu-Ren didn't expect such tremendous strength from Han. It was so powerful that Mu-Ren was knocked down in a single blow. Hal also knew a guy who also asked him to hit him. He said he was getting stronger that way, begging him to beat him again and again. He probably died in the process. Han asked Mu-Ren's friends if he could hit you once too. Mu-Ren's friends didn't understand what happened. They shouted that Li Han had hit back Mu-Ren. The friends asked Mu-Ren if he was okay. But Mu-Ren only said the word ghost. Mu Ren's friends picked him up and dragged him out of there. One of the friends told the other one to move the batons. Otherwise, they won't make it in time and Mu Ren will definitely drop his skates. Han's friend was once again punishing himself for being in the same class as Mu Ren. He decided to go up to the roof, hoping to get punched in the face. But he saw a different picture when he went upstairs. Mu Ren's friends were trying to bring him to his senses, and when they saw Han's friend, they told him to get out of the way. When Han saw Seo Jin, he asked him why he had come here. Seo Jin couldn't say a word, but he said it was Baek Mu Ren. Han asked if he meant that guy. Oh, don't worry, Seo Jin, he doesn't know how to do that. So it was one of the entrance tests for the second year. Apparently, the test was passed. Placing his hand on Seo Jin's shoulder, he told him to forget about that group, and suggested he go to his next class. Coming to the next class about the theory of foreign species. The teacher was Ha Cheon. But Han was excited about the subject, and decided to study today. Suddenly a student from the Shaolin Temple asked the teacher, "Didn't he say they would be learning material about the necromanta?" "Why did you start talking about banshees then?" the student asked. The teacher said he thought they had heard well of the necromancer's abilities. One of them is mind control through black magic. Do you remember the dungeon that Seo Monghyung asked his teacher about? Well, while exploring the Banshee dungeon, a necromancer was found on a throne in the deepest part of the dungeon. At the end of the Dark Astar dungeon, in addition to the dangerous banshees, there was a huge number of monsters with 6 threat levels, such as Death Knights. Once the threat of the dungeon increased, many warriors had to sacrifice their lives in battle, and only after the necromancer was killed did the dungeon become quiet. Summarizing, the teacher hints that when fighting a necromancer, you will have to fight with more than just him. Now the main topic of the lesson is clearer, the teacher asked. But suddenly Han raised his hands and wanted to ask the teacher a question. The teacher looked at him and realized that he was the rumored kid. Han didn't wait long and asked the teacher where to go to catch the necromancer. At this point, the head of the administration comes to the woman sitting in the office, and she says that there is no need to worry about the number of dungeons. Most of them are only inhabited by ghouls or low-level monsters anyway, said the woman. She asked the chief administrator if it would be good for the students to gain real combat experience. The head administrator supported her words and said that she was right. By the way, head, how is the raid on the newly appeared dungeon Demonic Ruins progressing? She asked. It was decided to entrust it to the instructors of the Heavenly Warrior Academy, said the head. Apparently there were some serious disagreements in other academies, said the woman. There were jerks coming from the Murin Union. Real combat instructor Cheon by himself is said to have spoken in defense. Thanks to him, there was not much controversy, said the head, Sword King Cheon Bai. He is one of the top 10 warriors of Mirim, the woman said. After all, she wouldn't mind Cheon Bai personally participating in the raid. However, even with such support, one must be extremely cautious in the dungeon. Compared to the previous dungeons, she felt a slightly different energy from the necromancer now. Did the head ask her about the other energy? She can't explain it exactly, but it bothers her a little. If she who can see everything in the world says that she feels anxious, then we should really take her words into consideration, said the head. And the demonic student who came to us recently, how's he doing? She asked. Getting used to the training? It seems he has completed the entrance battle and is now settling into the academy, said the head. Even if the instructors say that he lacks something, or has some shortcomings, do not pressure the student, she said to the head. After all, people from the demonic school can be very useful to us. And head, when you get a chance, please arrange a meeting with him. Do you want to see him in person? The head asked her. The head thought she had refused all the Kenko clans that wanted to meet with her, and now she was the first one who wanted to meet with her. That's right, head, she wants to meet him. Permission to deviate? The head asked. Soon we find out that she is the head of the department. Han is telling the teacher about the necromancer. What's his exact location, master? Hearing such a question from Khan, all the students began to resent and insult him. 6 of our graduates have already died at the hands of a necromancer this year. The corpses of half of them have not even been returned. If such unintelligent children continue to go into the dungeon, a terrible tragedy will happen, said the teacher. Han's information about the location of the dungeons is a top secret, and is only revealed to the oldest student. However, Han might foolishly lose his life, so I will tell you in general terms, said the teacher. There are 3 known necromancer sites in the country. One of them has just recently been discovered in our Sichuan province. This dungeon is not that far from here. The entrance is located on North Mother Mountain. This place is at the very outskirts. Even Sichuan people are not familiar with it well. Of course, guys, even if you want to go, they won't let you in. The warriors of the Murim Alliance guard the entrance to the dungeon closely. Han, thinking in his head, said it was enough to know what he had learned. If he could find a map of that place, he'd be fine. Han thought about it, and decided to tell the mercenary to find him the map. Ned and Khan is coming to you. The mercenary came to the classroom and saw that no one was there yet. He thought that everyone was still in the duel. He sat down on a chair and said he was tired. He held up the piece of torn shirt Han had given him. He thought that since his employer wasn't from the demonic school, he had no idea where his employer was from. But since he knows about the demonic small arm attack, he can be trusted, the mercenary said. But the employer, though? Why isn't everything in here? Han only wrote about the specifics of the fire. But it doesn't say anything about how to use the energy. It's like he's teasing him, mercenary thought. He cut it off at the most interesting point, the bloody bastard. He'd die of curiosity to know what was next. Sitting on the chair, the mercenary decided to think hard. 1 month of hiring in exchange for a secret book describing the demonic attack technique of the bloody hand. If you put it that way, it was a good deal for the mercenary's day. However, the employer was a bastard, so in the end things could get worse for the mercenary. I'll leave that question for later, the mercenary thought. The now undelayed business of mercenary is to rewrite the opening Kugel demonic attack bloody hand so as not to be forgotten. Suddenly someone entered the classroom with the words mercenary, and indeed no one can defeat him. Although it is understandable, heir to a prominent family. You're making fun of me, you bastard. If you have a complaint, let's settle it with swords, said Namgung-ho to his friend. Let's hurry up and put our things down and go to the stall, said Namgung-ho. When he saw the mercenary, he said it was the same guy from the demon school. After the opening battle, everyone goes to the party to meet another friend. Why is he sitting alone in his office? I wondered if he was already doing a written analysis of our fight, thought Namgung-ho. Suddenly Namgung-ho's friend told him to throw away his things and go to the stall. Namgung-ho told them to go without him. He suddenly had one thing to do. As he approached the dark swordsman, he was surprised at how much he had written about their fight. Maybe this victory was just a fluke, he thought. If my opponent is practicing hard, then he shouldn't be idle either, Namgung-ho thought. If I don't work hard, it will only be a matter of time before he catches up to me in strength. Once again, guys, the reason the necromancer is considered a frightening creature is because of his black magic. The ability to wield immortal creatures that, no matter how many times you kill them, come back to life. Sitting at his desk and walking around in his thoughts, Han decided that the necromancer wasn't that important. He could only control the servants with some dirty curse, and he couldn't do anything on his own. Suddenly, the teacher at the end of the lesson decided to ask the students a question. And whoever can answer it correctly will get plus 10 points for behavior this semester. The textbook gives information on how to fight against the necromancer. If you know material that is not in the book, tell me what the teacher said. Suddenly, Seo Mongyoung raised his hand and said that a weapon that contained anti-magic energy was being used in the battle against the necromancer. If you use such a weapon, a sacred power appears that can resist black magic. Bound teacher weapons are a good option in black magic combat, there is no denying it. However, such equipment is a rare find, so for a realistic opportunity to resist magic is unlikely to pass. The punishment squads involved in a raid on a necromancer are different from the usual ones. At the very least, there are only 10 members, and maybe even more. And since not every member of the squad can be the heir of a distinguished family, using a sacred weapon against a necromancer is an idea that is difficult to accomplish, said the girl. The teacher asked, so what should we do? Are you implying that there's a more realistic method to defeat a necromancer? It is the teacher, and it is fire, said the girl. The teacher was surprised by the girl's answer, and asked her what was the reason for this answer. The source of dark magic is darkness. If the natural power to expel darkness, you can weaken the enemy's abilities, said the girl. But also, if the implement is oiled and set on fire, the destructive power of fire can be applied as a method of purification. The teacher heard both of them and praised them for both correct answers. And the teacher awarded +10 behavior points to the two of them. Suddenly, Seo Jin asked Han if he knew her. She is a girl named Unsorin, the first year's first-ranking girl, and in addition to being beautiful, she also has a brilliant mind. You could say she represents the entire Heavenly Warrior Academy. After hearing the conversation between Seo Jin and Li Han, the teacher reprimanded Li Han and told him that he was misdirecting his attention. You also don't listen to the class at all, said the teacher. Of course I am listening, teacher, said Li Han. The sacred weapon is fire. But these are all useless things, teacher. There's a much simpler method that doesn't require you to use your brain, said Li Han. What is the method? Li Han asked the teacher. Han thinks that necromancer asshole without his mind control curse is just an empty shell. We just have to crush him before he uses the curse. After hearing Li Han's answer, the teacher said that no sacred power can help against a power that is many times greater than it. Start studying the material from the first year properly, student Li Han. Li Han wasn't satisfied with the teacher's words and said if the opponent was using darkness, one should gain the upper hand with a force that would absorb that very darkness. The teacher was surprised at the answer and asked what he meant. What other power is there that can absorb darkness? Yes, master, such power has existed since ancient times, said Li Han. He is talking about people who can use the power of darkness to punish monsters. If a necromancer is the embodiment of darkness, then they are the ones who suck out the darkness, said Li Han with a baleful look. When Li Han said that, they were all surprised. But Unsorin was angry and said that if there was still such an organization, we wouldn't even go to the academy. She looked at her teacher, and saw that he was also dumbfounded by this answer. Han said those words and put fear in the boys. But Han was happy about it, and told Seo Jin that he had a very important day today. But Han's class isn't over yet, said Seo Jin, asking him if he was going to go to the next class. Han said that he looked at the textbook that Seo Jin had given him. He said that he had looked at the textbook that Seo Jin had given him, so if he bought the book, he would understand the lesson in general terms. Running out of class, Han stepped on a pen and broke it. The pen was a gift to the teacher from the head of the department. And this kid stepped on it. The teacher decided to give Li Han 10 points for behavior. After the lesson was over, the teacher turned around and left. Unsorin noticed that the teacher had such an amazing expression on his face. If she searched all over the country, she wouldn't be able to find an expert in monster and dungeon theory better than him. Unsorin decided that she should ask her great-grandmother about dark magic, because she should definitely know. But a friend of Somin Young's ran in. He told him that the two of them came together when he enrolled. Sunbae said he saw the dark swordsman next to Li Han a while ago. Somin Young wondered if the demonic school guy was related to Li Han. On second thought, perhaps he understood a little bit where Han's roots of arrogance came from. If you had a demonic school or someone else behind you, you'd be more daring. Maybe Li Han hired him as a security guard, being a rich offspring, Somin Young thought. Even so, Li Han is really out of line, said the guy. No guys, said Somin Young, we're still each other's classmates, so there's no need to do anything. But by the way, it seems that not only us, but the Shaolin Temple disciples also tensed up, said Semunjiang. Somin Young thinks they are furious because the Shaolin Temple pays great attention to the manners and behavior of its students. It looks like they're going to teach Li Han a lesson with their methods. So we don't have to get involved. You know how the first martial arts evaluation of the second year is, right? Semunjiang asked the guys. It would all be revealed soon anyway, whether this Li Han had talent or not. In the group hunt, we will divide into several people and kill the monsters. So, if Li Han has the ability to catch monsters, he will show it in battle, said Somin Young. Our team's strength is unbeatable. When the time comes, we'll beat that Li Han with our skills, said Somin Young. And after he embarrasses himself, he'll have a good idea of where he belongs, Somin Young said with an angry look. Meanwhile, the dark swordsman had been writing something on paper for 2 hours without a break. Namgung Ho sat down, and was surprised by his persistence. Did he really get so much knowledge from our fight? Namgung Ho thought. He's even trying to write down 3 sentences. What was the secret of his analytical ability that Namgung Ho was pondering? He's dying to know. But suddenly Han came running in, and said he'd found him, and ordered him to leave. Namgung Ho was surprised and wondered who it was. Khan started joking about him, saying that he was in his second year of study, so he was older than the mercenary. When Mercenaire heard that, he told Khan that the Arabic numerals read backwards. That's fourth year. By the way, employer, the lessons aren't actually over yet, said Dark Swordsman. What kind of model student are you going to be? Seeing Namgung Ho from behind, Han asked who was behind him. Is it his buddy? The Dark Swordsman saw Namgung Ho and apologized for Han's rude behavior. Smogut said it was all right. But his eyes were only on the sheet, trying to make out what the Dark Swordsman had written. But his handwriting was so small it was impossible to see. Khan's pissed at him for telling him to go, and he can't get his ass out of his chair. Hearing that, Han wanted to rescind that offer. The Dark Swordsman jumped up abruptly and said goodbye to the air. As he approached Khan, he asked him what was wrong. Khan only said he had found something and ordered him to go faster. Namgung Ho looked at them and thought to himself, who was he to be so dismissive of the Dark Swordsman? Wait a minute, said the Dark Swordsman. The mercenary asked if he was serious about going there? Han said yes. Suddenly someone said, so that's where Namgung Ho was. He won first place in the Pima fight. Congratulations, son, he said. Namgung Ho's voice sounded very familiar. It was his uncle. Why are you here? Namgung Ho asked. Well, how did your uncle come to say that? I've come to tell you the good news. Ready to hear it? He asked. Isn't Namgung Ho so happy? He thought it wouldn't work because the mission is top secret, and it is forbidden to be present. Thank you for being from Namgung Ho's family, Uncle said. So since he's allowed to participate, it's better to work a little harder, the young leader said. Uncle Namgung Ho. After all, storming a dungeon is the best addition to a student's biography, said Uncle. Namgung Ho asked what is the threat level of Uncle. Uncle Long Unbidden said 12th. After all, he was still the one who downplayed it. There was already talk of defining a new threat level. Now Namgung Ho understood why the students of the academy were forbidden to participate in the mission. Then who to vouch for the leadership this time? Asked Namgung Ho. Uncle asked if he meant the commander of the punitive unit. He had been serving him for many years. Khan was shocked to hear such an answer. The outskirts of Sichuan. On some mountain. A warrior who finally returned to Sichuan. It's been 3 months since he was last here. He's so used to this view, but it feels like he hasn't seen it in ages. After all, it was a long expedition this time. For the first time in a long time, he would meet Madame Legay Weather. It was the real combat instructor, Sword King Cheonbai. When he saw the people, he realized that the meeting was at the Dragon Tavern. After arriving at the Dragon Tavern, Sword King Cheonbai entered the tavern. The waiter saw him and said that if they knew he was coming, they would have prepared everything in advance. The Sword King said modestly that he didn't need to, because he didn't want to make a fuss. Cheonbai asked the waiter his place is the same. The waiter smilingly said yes, on the top floor. Luby was surprised, and said what good fortune. They never thought they would see such a gentleman in a dragon tavern. One of the visitors asked who it was. It's Sword King Cheonbai himself. He is one of the 10 strongest warriors recognized by the Alliance. Mr. Cheonbin is the best among the masters that have cleared several dozen dungeons. After all, it can be said that our peaceful life in Sichuan is now the merit of the Sword King. As a native of Sichuan province, he was the first warrior to be nicknamed the Sword Master. As he approached his room, he met Jun Gu. He greeted Mr. Cheonbai. He said he was already waiting inside. Upon entering the room, he was greeted by Mrs. Legweather, praising him for his excellent work on the last expedition. Bowing in front of Mrs. Legweather, he asked if the development of the magic tools she had told him about a few days ago was going well. When he looked at everyone, he saw Instructor Wu Sang, Instructor Ha Chion, and the head of the administration department who had come for him. Cheonbai said that the composition of today's meeting without a word says the scale of the upcoming assault. How many floors is the underground dungeon? He asked. Mrs. Legweather decided to start the meeting quickly. She told the Sword King to take a seat at the table. Cheonbai asked Madame Legweather how big was the dungeon before he sat down. She said that it was better to see it for yourself than to explain it in words. Mrs. Legweather used magic to show the size of the dungeon. The Sword King was fired and thought it was void-filling matter or telekinesis. Legweather said she was surprised too when she got the results of the reconnaissance. And it's still not an accurate picture. After all, more than half of the 10 members of the advance party were killed, she said. The Sword King was schooled by what he heard and said that even that creepy third dungeon had 10 floors. And here there are as many as 15, he said. I can't even believe it. What do you think? Instructor Wool-san asked the Sword King. This is the first necromancer to build such a large-scale dungeon. Wool-san thinks he used a fair number of servants for this, he said. Wool-san asked the department chair to put all the cards together because he had noticed something. The department chair said she had noticed something too. As you've all realized by now, the dungeon consists of 15 floors. Putting all the maps together, the picture becomes very confusing, so it is difficult to find any correlations, say Mrs. Legweather. However, if you notice in the large passages of the dungeon, the outlines of hieroglyphics, there is a very unexpected picture, said the head of the administration. After all, from the 1st to the 8th floor you can see the hieroglyph of night, in which there are 8 features. And from the 9th to the 11th is the character fork, which has 3 lines. 8 plus 3 makes 11, and from the 12th to the 15th character king, consisting of 4 features. So the sum total is 15, said Wool-san. This makes it clear that the form of the dungeon forms the word King Yiksha. The head of the administration said that there is indeed such a proposal. He thinks that it is far from a mere coincidence that combining the cards results in a word. Wool-sang said he didn't know if it was real yet, but it seemed too early to be surprised. There are stone slabs on the floor from the 1st to the 15th floor. They are made of magical stones that respond to mana. If you look at the stone slabs of each floor separately, you can't see anything, but by combining the cards you get an inverted 5-pointed star, which is called the symbol of the devil, namely the pentagram, said teacher Wool-san. Seeing this, everyone was surprised, but Wool-san wasn't done yet. He said that it wasn't a close coincidence. After all, it could be indisputably stated that the magic circle was a powerful curse enveloping the entire dungeon. The head of the administration couldn't believe that a dungeon was inflicted with black magic of such a high grade. He asked if it was too much for a necromancer. Teacher Ha-cheon said to the head of the department, "If this is all true, has he really begun his invasion of our world?" he asked. "Looks like what Mrs. Legweather said. Lord of the spirits of death, Mephisto is just as Instructor Wool-san said. The magic circle is under a 3-stage curse," she said. "The first curse is coercion, the second is mind control magic." The Sword King told the supervisor not to worry so much. No matter what kind of dungeon it was, the main thing was to clean it up. But if all of a sudden it is not easy, you can get a lot of useful knowledge from him. After all, for a Sword King, it is only a pleasure, he said. Moreover, the value of the nickname King of the Sword given to you. He has never neglected it. After all, he's already prepared even for Sura's life. He has asked you to trust him? Mrs. Legweather said that she should express her support instead of fretting and worrying in vain. She thinks everyone realizes that the dungeon to go to this time is more dangerous than ever, since it's the first one where the enemies have started to act for real. Instructor Lee Jun-gu said that the punishment squad of the Demon Ruins dungeon is 13 people, and they are ready to leave at any time. The head of the department said yes to the storming of the Demonic Ruin dungeon. She will be waiting at the academy for their successful return. Suddenly, someone approached a shop with cultural history maps. The vendor asked Dark Swordsman why he was looking for this map. The Dark Swordsman remained silent and asked how much he owed. The vendor said 10 nan of gold. When the Dark Swordsman heard the price, he asked, "Where has a map ever cost a fortune?" The seller said it's obvious to a child that it won't be cheap. Try scouring all of Sichuan. See where else you can get a map of the Mother Mountain dungeon. It wasn't easy to draw. After all, for the sake of this map, several people went into the confusing labyrinth of the dungeon. And 6 of them didn't even come back, the seller said. The Dark Swordsman asked the vendor, "Because if the dungeon is cleared, doesn't the card lose its usefulness?" The vendor said he didn't understand. On the contrary, it's valuable. There are various chests and books scattered throughout the labyrinth. Even if the storming of the dungeon is over, you can find many different items inside. Warriors who participated in the assault cannot, after all, take with them absolutely everything found, said the seller. The salesman said that when there is a benefit, no money is spared. And why such a precious card 10 nannies just pairs a guy? The Dark Swordsman began to resent the fact that day after day his money was going out. Looking at the shopping list, Han asked him to buy a chicken, but it had to be alive. At that time, Han was at home reading books. When he threw out 62 textbooks, he said that this book was the last one. But he didn't learn much from those books. After all, he already knew most of the content. So he learned the material in no time. He thought he would have no problems at the academy now. The Dark Swordsman came home and brought Han a live chicken and a map of the dungeon. He asked him, "Is there nothing else you need, employer?" Han told him that he pleased him every time. He does everything in the moment. He praised the Dark Swordsman. He's a miracle, not a mercenary. The Dark Swordsman asked him when he would tell him about the demonic attack of the Bloody Hand. "And you about it, O mercenary," said Han. "I'll tell you about it when I get back from the dungeon." The Dark Swordsman begins to visualize moments from the dungeon. How Han says he was wrong and asks the Dark Swordsman to save him, because then how will the Dark Swordsman save him? He will tell him to tell Han to give away all the secrets of the demonic attack of the Bloody Hand. The Dark Swordsman told Han that he would go with him. Han asked him who would do the cooking. It would only take Han 2 hours. "You could say that's the power of the Dark Swordsman," he said. Han didn't resist for long and gave the Dark Swordsman permission. And in his mind Han said it was time to rip the necromancer's head off. Han and the mercenary came to Mutka Mountain. Han asked the mercenary if this was the entrance to the dungeon. "According to the map, yes, Khan." "What do we do?" the mercenary asked. "So Han, all these pits are from the Murima Union. They even built a warrior stronghold," said the mercenary. "Times change," said Khan, "but the Union minions remain the same. Shouldn't we just sweep them out of the way and go in?" "According to the map, there's a small path nearby," the mercenary said. "Maybe someone made it as a detour. The mercenary thinks there's no one there." "Why go to all this trouble?" Han asked. "We can deal with these guards and go in through the main passage," said Han. When they entered the forest through the back door, they came upon an underground entrance. When Han saw it, he said, "Let's go through it." Praising himself, the mercenary said that such preparedness speaks of excellent experience and skills. "It is much faster and safer to follow this path than the main one," the mercenary said. Khan agreed with the mercenary and said, "Then let's go through." But the mercenary stopped him and said he didn't understand. There might be some monsters coming out. Taking the sword in his hands, the mercenary said an invasion should always be silent and swift. He could rely on it. The mercenary ripped the boards with his sword and said as they came in, they would mend the boards back together, and all would be well. Suddenly, Han asked, what was he in such a hurry to get to the dungeon? After all, he hadn't even ordered anything yet. "You're not hiding anything?" Han asked. When he heard Han's question, the mercenary became worried. Han asked him, so he didn't think about asking Han for the secret of the technique when he was dying in the dungeon and begging to be rescued. The mercenary said that the reason he wants to enter the dungeon sooner is because of the items, or differently, sacred weapons. After all, it has otherworldly power and there are tons of it in the dungeon. "Very useful," said the mercenary. Han asked the otherworldly force. "Is that kind of good?" "It's just fine. Moreover, bound weapons are extremely expensive," said the mercenary. "After all, there are even professional hunters for them." The necromancer's dungeon they were about to enter was a treasure trove compared to the others. The mercenary said maybe they'll find a lot of interesting things inside. As they entered the dungeon, the mercenary stopped them. He said they should study the place, for the moisture on the walls had dried up. The mercenary said it was unnatural. It's not possible in a damp cave. He assumed it was the footprints of a man or a monster. The mercenary concentrates and tries to pick up signs of someone's presence. But the chicken started to interfere with him, so the hired man got angry and told his employer to shut it up with something. Han asked why shut her up. After all, she was fulfilling her role now. The mercenary turned and asked what was the point of it. At this rate, the monsters would be the first to spot them. Khan said the mercenary is very stuffy. The winged one will tell them everything. Just be good and watch him, mercenary. Looking at the map, the mercenary decided to study it to ensure they had a way to retreat later. As the mercenary made his way along the path, he realized that the map was worth the money. After all, it was made to perfection. By the way, his employer was on the right track all along. The mercenary thought that the chicken was really telling him what to do. After all, the hirer will feel the need for a map soon. Because the fear of the dungeon starts from 2 to 3 floors, the mercenary thought in his head. Suddenly, Khan turned to the mercenary and asked, Are dungeons always this long? Is there no place to take a shortcut? The mercenary said no, this is the shortest way. If they go further in a straight line, there will be a staircase down to the second floor. When they reached two forks that were not on the map, the mercenary told Han to decide which one to enter. Han didn't think for a long time and sticking to the chicken's voice said to go to the right. The mercenary began to panic and asked why the hell he trusted such important decisions to a chicken. I mean, why the hell did Han ask? Our hen reports to Han about the situation in the dungeon. Ahead, at a distance of 7 meters is a wall, said Han. It's also quite long and gentle, and there are 2 more roads to the right and left. The left one is sloping and the right one is angled, for he had realized it from the winged one's scream. The sound in a confined space can be heard with 2 ears, Han told the mercenary. The remaining trace of the mercenary's boot in the dungeon, after a while, began to move. Suddenly, monster hands began to emerge from behind the mercenary and Han's footprints. The dungeon was filled with monsters. As they looked among themselves, they noticed the footprints of the boys. Suddenly they smelled the odor of human flesh. Suddenly, one of them told the Zhongyuan people they had an intruder. After hearing all this information, they were ordered to kill them. The Sword King told everyone to hurry because they were leaving. Suddenly, Madame Legay-Weather stopped Mr. Cheon by. She brought one thing when she was in Zhongyuan. The Sword King saw what she had brought. He asked what was it, a helmet? The King of Swords is not just a helmet, but a relic called the Invisibility Cap. This helmet has the ability to hide its wearer. It was this helmet that helped the Lich King escape and save herself, said Mrs. Legweather. So it's not just a magic item, said the Sword King. He asked why she was giving it to him. Of course, she doesn't doubt your skills, but have your helmet with you just in case. The lady said that she was relying on the Sword King, and wished them luck for the upcoming battle. Our primary goal is to clear the dungeon of the demonic ruins, said the teacher. But what we should pay attention to most is safety, of course. No one should die in this dungeon. Because at the moment of death, an ally will turn into an enemy. The Sword King said it's enough to take that into consideration. I think they know the rest. No matter how many enemies there are, destroy them all. Let the invasion begin. Upon entering the dungeon, the Sword King said that the horizon was clear. There was no sign of enemy presence nearby. The Sword King found this silence strange, as if they had been spotted already. After all, it had been half an hour since they had entered the dungeon. However, until now, not even the flapping of an insect wing, let alone monsters, had been heard. Those things couldn't have failed to recognize that we were here. Somehow this all became suspicious to him. Suddenly, the heavenly warrior Nanyang stopped the Sword King. He said that he wanted to introduce him to the Namgung family leader boy he had once told him about. So he is the young leader, said the Sword King. After all, looking at him, you can tell that he has adopted his father's spirit. The King of Swords said he was sorry for the loss of his father. He was an incredible man. There were even a few times that the Sword King refused to be indebted to him. The Sword King had heard that he was a real talent in martial arts. Can you follow us? He asked the boy. The Sword King told the boy that this trek would serve him well in the future. Suddenly the guide said there was a fork ahead. The Sword King asked the guide if there was a wide path there. There they will set up a stronghold, said the Sword King. How can he meet the Sword King in person? Uncle asked Namgung Ho. Namgung Ho is still in shock. Standing next to him, it felt like his energy was pressing down on him. Uncle Namgung Ho told him to gain a lot of knowledge from this trek. After all, if he went off the front, he would have to support him from the back. There is only one textbook from the academy on this raid. Namgung Ho has been at the top of the rankings since 4th year. You know him too, Instructor Ha Chion asked the teacher. Instructor Ha Chion put his hand on the ground and felt small vibrations, and said they were coming. Ha Chion shouted the occurrence of the situation of class number 4. Ordering the Sword King to move into a defensive position. The Sword King has ordered everyone to stop panicking, and everyone to prepare their swords. And Uncle Namgung Ho ordered everyone to get their blades. Namgung Ho didn't know what was going on. His uncle told him to keep his guard up and be on the lookout. The Sword King asked the instructor if we could rattle some bones, and ordered the warriors to attack. As he descended the stairs, the mercenary had the feeling that something was amiss. He could be lucky, but not that lucky? The mercenary doesn't know if it's true or not. The mercenary doesn't know if the chicken is telling the truth. but his employer has never wandered and has reached the second floor without a hitch, the mercenary reasoned in his head. The mercenary thought he was a common ignoramus, but maybe his employer was really powerful. Then his claims that he would understand the necromancer were not empty words either. Suddenly Khan shouted to mercenary and asked, "Those types are our enemies?" He meant those things up ahead. "They're a bit disgruntled, don't you think?" Han asked. "They're skeletons," said the mercenary. "And these things are terribly annoying." Looking at them, the mercenary saw even a skeleton mage. "Those things have a threat level 5. In a group, they can even beat a wyvern," said the mercenary. Han began to warm up and told the mercenary to keep his voice down and hold the chicken. He asked the mercenary if he killed those bony ones, would those things really fall out? Han said he was talking about those items. He thought he'd know the answer when he failed them all. Khan told mercenary the items that would fall from the monsters were all his, and told him to stand aside. And Han moved into battle. Seeing what Han would do in battle was a surprise to mercenary. After all, Han was using the demonic attack of the Bloody Hand 9 years ago. A dark swordsman's dwelling in the mountains. He trained every day and tried to fulfill his dream. The teacher watched him strive and aim to embody that power. Seeing him burned, the teacher said enough. The dark swordsman asked the teacher if he really wouldn't succeed. The teacher told the dark swordsman to take his time. Didn't he say that progress doesn't come quickly? The dark swordsman doesn't have much internal energy yet, so the technique stops at this point. It may be disappointing, but this is the way of life, said Master. But if the dark swordsman reaches a certain level in martial arts, the left-hand side effect will go away. But just in case, for a while, the teacher won't be passing any other techniques to the dark swordsman. The dark swordsman was upset and asked shouldn't he, being the heir of the demonic school, adopt all the techniques to revive it as soon as possible. The teacher said that was correct, but if the dark swordsman was unable to control his left arm, he would have to kill him with his own hands. Otherwise, he would end up in the grave himself. The teacher said as soon as he finds a way to restrain his left hand, he will continue to pass on the technique. It would be safer for everyone. The dark swordsman would need at least 3 days for his internal energy to calm down. So for now, rest, dark swordsman, said teacher. The dark swordsman thought about his teacher's words, because if he didn't learn to control his left hand, he wouldn't be the heir. Seeing Han use the bloody hand attack, the dark swordsman was surprised. After all, this was the attack he wanted to master. Khan was so strong and confident in his strength that he went alone into battle and shouted to the bony ones to devour his fire. Han couldn't believe he'd only taken down a couple of creatures. He thought, using some more of his internal energy. Suddenly, the biggest skeleton accumulated its magic and attacked Han. But Han did not expect this blow. Han jumped up and dodged the blow. And he said that asshole skeleton ruined his uniform. Seeing something shiny on the ground, Han quickly grabbed it. It was a seashell. Han asked the mercenary, "Is this the sacred weapon?" But the mercenary told him to look ahead. But Han told him not to be so afraid. After all, he wanted to know the demonic attack of the bloody hand. Then mercenary, don't take your eyes off to the side, said Han. After all, he would show him the level 9 demonic attack of the bloody hand. Using all of his energy, Han executed a palm blast of bloody hand. The skeletons were all on fire. But the main skeleton didn't die in any way. He was the most resilient creature. Han said, looking at him brought back memories. It was a long time ago that he'd had to bust his ass over a bony head. Attacking him, Khan asked, "Why the fuck are skeletons so annoying?" But the skeleton was defeated by Khan before he could say a word. Han told mercenary that he was done, and there was nothing to stand still. But he remembered to look around. After all, the mercenary had said the items should fall out. Looking all around, Han found the armor. But the mercenary couldn't believe that an academy student could take down a monster in no time. He thought Han was just a psycho with a screw loose. But as it turned out, he was also hiding such abilities. Khan was pleased with the find and told the mercenary to have a look. The armor fit him perfectly. "The mercenary seems to be one of the objects," Han said. The mercenary angrily told Han not to make a fuss, for they were still at the beginning of the second floor. There would be plenty more of these things ahead. Han was surprised at the mercenary's behavior, and couldn't understand what was wrong with him. He was pouting, probably because he didn't get anything. Han thought. Khan gave the mercenary a shell for the sake of respect. He was sorry to leave him there. But the mercenary said he didn't need it. After traveling to the deepest floor, the necromancer simply sat on his throne and fed off the energy, but he couldn't get enough. He asked if this was all the inner energy those Murim had. The necromancer said that living sacrifices would be needed. He summoned Rera to him, and told him that the enemies were close and had entered the temple, and ordered him to stop them. Sitting on his throne, the necromancer called for the dead to wake up. He wondered who would come to him this time. Dying of interest. At that time the war and the Sword King were in battle. The Sword King said to continue the attack and not to retreat. The Sword King ordered the non-combatants to be protected, and ordering a squad of reinforcements to cast the spell, while Namgung Ho had already destroyed several dozen monsters, but they were still not finished. After all, he now realized what a level 12 dungeon really was. He couldn't afford to be a burden to the others. Even if he could barely hold on, if he fell, it would be the end of him. Without noticing from behind, the skeleton attacked Namgung Ho. Uncle managed to kill him. Uncle said the movements became very tense. I mean, the other dungeons aren't even close to this one. So it's good to be nervous too. However, if you overdo it, stress will only cause harm. So be careful, Namgung Ho, Uncle said. The Sword King stood in front of the skeletons and asked them if they were going to attack. Do they have the intelligence to be scared? After all, they are not even fit for warming up. The Sword King decided to put the helmet's abilities to the test that the department head had given him. Turning on his invisibility ability, the Sword King exterminated all the skeletons. When he heard that there were no casualties and the entire cast was intact, the Sword King said that those were the last skeletons at that time. The battle is just about an hour away. And the Sword King ordered everyone to hurry up because they had wasted a lot of time in the battle. Namgung Ho was surprised by the Sword King's skill. Before he knew it, the Sword King had crushed all the monsters with a single blow. Uncle Namgung Ho told him to keep his eyes open at all times. In the meantime, he will go to the Sword King and report the situation. Namgung Ho was frustrated that he had let his guard down just because of an inferior grade monster. In order to become stronger here, he would need to at least keep up with the Sword King's pace a little bit. While the mercenary watched the further path, Han was circulating energy. Khan asked how the situation was ahead. The mercenary said all the monsters have been destroyed. We can move forward. The mercenary saw him circulating energy and thought that it was a technique that had been lost 140 years ago. But judging from his destructive fighting, he had already reached the level of Kyochoken. However, since his flames of demonic energy couldn't burn all the enemies, the level probably wasn't that high after all. If you looked at it as a whole, the employer was either slightly lower in strength, or equal to him. As Han went deeper into the dungeon, he saw a flaw in the wall. The mercenary said the necromancer must have had his subordinates build it. The mercenary said that it could be considered that the dungeon was just beginning from here. There are monsters ahead of us that the lower-class skeletons couldn't even stand next to. It is also possible to fall into a trap or barrier here. Suddenly something jumped out in front of them. The mercenary said that they should come closer and look around. Khan found the place quite spacious, and cozier than he had thought. The mercenary couldn't believe that such a large building had been built inside the dungeon. Khan saw some scribbles on the table. The mercenary said they were pictographs, like Egyptian hieroglyphics. But he himself is not at all sure, said the mercenary. If you cross India and move further west, there will be a Roman Empire. But the mercenary was more interested in what such hieroglyphics were doing here. It's some kind of stone plaques with incomprehensible inscriptions, and very suspicious control panels, the mercenary said. The mercenary said he thought they were on the wrong road, and will have to go back. Thinking in his head, the mercenary remembered that there were no monsters on the way, but it would take time to find a new road. As the mercenary walked away, Han clicked on the hieroglyphics. Suddenly something opened up. Han was very curious, but he was stopped by the mercenary. The mercenary told him not to touch those things in any way. They could be trapped. Khan said he could make out some of the signs. The mercenary, from what he heard, told Han don't lie. The mercenary said to look at it, for nothing had happened. Consider yourself lucky that no trap was activated, and it would be good to go looking for another road soon. As they were leaving, they heard the gate open. The mercenary began to panic, because he knew something was going to happen. The mercenary shouted the trap was activated. "We must find a way out quickly," said the mercenary. Khan said he thought he had triggered a mechanism. "What the hell kind of mechanism?" the mercenary asked. "Are we stuck here, asshole?" Khan told him, if his eyes weren't already out of their orbits, to look over there. "There's a mercenary light over there." The mercenary asked Han what he had pressed. "It wasn't a trap, was it?" Suddenly a beam shot out. The mercenary dodged even from fright. Looking at the end of the beam, the mercenary asked if it was a teleportation gate. The mercenary couldn't believe that Han had figured out the secret code of the dungeon in no time. Han said it was a gateway to the other side. He wondered how he'd figured out the secret code, but in a nutshell, it's all because it's too unbelievable. "But this may not be the shortest way, so let's look around first," said the mercenary. Han refused and said that he was a busy man, and they had no time. Han ran into the portal without fear. The mercenary tried to stop him, but it was pointless. Khan only told him to grab the chicken. The employer, condemning Han's actions, called him crazy for somehow storming off so recklessly. He asked him if he'd die if his fucking employer listened to him. "He'll see as soon as they're done with the dungeon. He'll pay his debts," said the mercenary, after moving to the 7th floor of the demon ruin dungeon. The mercenary was already calling Han names before he landed. The mercenary felt disgusting, as if joints had been pulled out of his limbs and then put back in. He began to feel nauseous, and he couldn't breathe, as if he were underwater. "By the way, is this the 7th floor?" the mercenary asked. "Thank goodness I have the dungeon map memorized," said the mercenary. It turned out that the portal was connected to some pretty deep places. When he noticed he was the only one teleporting, he thought they'd gone to different places. The mercenary wondered why he'd had the misfortune to contract with a lunatic. Next time he would look at his eyes before he signed a contract. Suddenly the mercenary heard a sound of some sort. Looking around, he saw a person. The mercenary asked her if she was all right. When he saw she was covered in blood, the mercenary asked what happened here. She said that they were under surprise attack. She said it all happened in the blink of an eye. She doesn't even remember all the details of what happened. "This place was deep, so it could be inhabited by monsters," said mercenary, "from level 6 and above. So many people died, it's a terrible picture." The mercenary asked her if there were any more survivors. She said no one else, all of them must have been killed by the monsters. "First we have to get out of here," said the mercenary. And asked if she could stand up. Thanking the mercenary, she said yes. The mercenary said with thanks later. The mercenary looked ahead and sensed that there must be a way out. When he saw that the feathered one wasn't moving, he wondered why it had reclined suddenly out of the blue. The polluted air must have made it hard for her, he thought. The mercenary asked the girl for permission to ask a question. How does she know he's a mercenary? Suddenly the mercenary heard the words, "What a pity." He was about to buy into her plan. But the mercenary sensed that something was wrong. Taking the sword in hand, the mercenary was almost deceived. How dare she pull such dirty tricks? With a swing of his sword, the mercenary didn't feel it slash the monster. But it was a banshee, and that's why he didn't feel the blade. Looking around, the mercenary saw that the banshee's cries had made all the monstrosities stand up. But suddenly the walls began to move as well. But it was a stone golem, and on top of that a few dozen level 5 monsters, said the mercenary. The mercenary had nowhere to go because he was alone. Suddenly, Han and his attack appeared out of nowhere, and told them to leave the items to him. Han felt his strength slipping, as he had been circulating power recently. He thought that the internal energy was slowly recovering due to the weakness of his body. But he had only used up 1 capful of energy in the entire time. But even if the energy is really slow to recover because of Li Han's frailty, somehow things are too bad, Han thought. Han thought something had gone wrong after moving through the gate. But he wasn't 100% sure, but maybe that was the problem. By the way, the air here is strange, Han said. It's been uncomfortable to breathe lately. If the air is already polluted at a distance of 30 zhang, then he is now somewhere on the 7th floor. If the air is already polluted at a distance of 30 zhang, he's now somewhere around the 7th floor. Even though the recovery of internal energy has slowed down, it can't be helped. The only thing left for Han to do is to moderate his breaths with the turtle breathing technique. After all, Han had to carry a chicken with him to find the dirty air. Where is the mercenary with the winged one? Han asked. Khan saw the mercenary and asked if he was the one making the noise. As the saying goes, remember the sun, here comes the ray. Seeing the mercenary's hand, the Khan asked what was wrong with his hand, because it was swollen. The mercenary just asked him what he was doing here holding his hand. The mercenary said that this was the limit of what he could do and he could do no more. Khan was surprised at the mercenary's words. Screaming from the pain in his arm, the mercenary told Han to leave, unless of course he wanted to die quicker. Pushing Han away, the mercenary said he would finish the monsters himself. The mercenary said that he would kill the monsters himself, because such a stone block could not be defeated without at least the energy of the sword. I mean, he's not strong enough to use it yet, but with that thing on his arm, everything changes. It's enough for him to take one hit on a rock like this. As the mercenary began to fight, he said that there was no way he, or the creature on his arm, would lose to a scum like them. For at last the blade has begun to pass through. If you can be cut, attack in any number, even thousands. After showing the dark swordsman one thing, the teacher asked if he knew what it was. After all, it was the weapon that led to the bloody tragedy of a village called Misan. It was dangerous but also unusual, so he sealed it. Handing the weapon to the dark swordsman, the teacher said it was his. When the mercenary heard that, he said that he still lacked skill. How can he accept such a valuable item? Wouldn't it be better for you to use it? The dark swordsman asked. This thing, to be more precise, is an unholy living dark swordsman. Having penetrated the human body, it will suck energy until the moment of death of violence. However, the creature does not only cause harm. In exchange for internal energy, the donor can receive the power of the unclean, said teacher. However, if you lose control, dark swordsman, the creature will swallow the mind. And the more energy the creature gathers, the stronger the side effect. That's the reason why the teacher can't compare to the undead. The dark swordsman doesn't have much energy, so he can withstand the creature's side effect. If you learn fighting and spiritual techniques suitable to the nature of the unclean, you can restrain the creature's supernatural power. Shall we do it, dark swordsman? Are you ready to try it out? But once you've decided on a place, you can't change it. Getting to work, the teacher told the dark swordsman that there was no way he was going to let this thing enslave his mind. Suddenly, the dark swordsman suffered a terrible pain in his other arm. But his teacher had told him not to lose consciousness. Fighting the monsters, the dark swordsman chopped them down one by one. He asked them what ditch their spirits had been washed into. The mercenary tried to make them angry so he could have fun hunting. Han just stood there and watched the dark swordsman fight alone. But suddenly, he used a demonic small arm attack, defeating them with a single blow. After defeating all the monsters, the dark swordsman took a deep breath, exhausted. Han told him what a show he had put on. Even he was surprised. He slashed the bodies of evil spirits without the power of the sword, and destroyed that stone giant in one fell swoop. Han asked what was that thing in the mercenary's hand. The dark swordsman said he didn't need to know. And by the way, employer, is it planned to continue storming the dungeon? Asked the dark swordsman. But the mercenary in the process said that he realized that in the current situation, it would be impossible to clear the dungeon completely. If they keep going down, much stronger monsters will crawl out. The mercenary doesn't know what the employer's goal is, but he will give advice. It is better to end here and return to the surface, said the mercenary. After all, he will no longer be able to protect his employer. He didn't want to say that, but he can handle this dungeon. And you don't have to worry about the contract. All responsibility lies with him, the mercenary said. The mercenary asked Khan if he thought life was a priority. Without thinking, Han told the mercenary to listen to him now. If the mercenary kept using this thing, it would swallow him whole. The mercenary told Han that he was worrying in vain. He didn't even know what the creature was. Han said it's a yokai. After all, it's not a spiritual being that can be trained. Hearing this, the mercenary told Han to shut up out of anger. He said, "You can't understand the nature of this creature," he said. Khan asked with a menacing look that he would only understand when he saw it with his own eyes. The hired man said not to make the hirer repeat it again, and told him to turn off his inquisitiveness. Han calmly told the mercenary so be it, and asked the mercenary for a sword. Taking the sword in his hand, Han cut off the mercenary's hand. Khan told the mercenary to raise the rest of his arm. They're about to put his stump back on. Why was the mercenary surprised? So you cut it off first, and now you're going to reattach it, the mercenary asked Han. If he's your parasite, he must be able to figure it out for himself, said Han. Did you really think that thing would just go away? Han asked. Mercenary said, what does he know about it? And how dare he tear off his arm? The mercenary asked. Khan told him to look, for the parasite was already returning to its place on his arm. But the mercenary did not believe it. But when he felt something touching his severed arm, he couldn't believe it, and asked how it was possible. Han said that in order not to die from the murky air of the dungeon, one must use breathing techniques. It was to find that air that Han had brought the winged one. But the mercenary is fine without breathing techniques, so it's all thanks to this thing sucking his blood, Han said. By the way, increased regeneration is also one of the features of the Akai. It's not cool, of course, to carry such a parasite on your back, mercenary. But mercenary, don't be fooled into thinking you can hold back. For as he saw, the hand clawed back not of his own free will, said Han. Han turned around and said, let's keep moving. There's nothing good here to keep hanging around. But the mercenary stopped him and asked if he knew about this creature. How should he proceed? The mercenary asked. What to do? Han asked, now sharply considering getting rid of him. The mercenary answered no. On the contrary, he wants to learn how to wield it properly. In truth, the reason why he couldn't learn any other techniques other than the demonic small hand attack. Now Han could see why the mercenary was so hesitant when he heard about the demonic blood hand attack. After all, the mercenary had been told by his teacher to use the demonic small arm attack correctly in case. He was right, Han said. Yokai feeds on his blood, or in other words, his yang energy. That's why he doesn't react to yin-based fighting techniques, such as the demonic small arm attack. Han said, if he were to study the demonic attack of the bloody hand that was based on fire energy, the creature would either disappear by burning in flames, or she'd kill a mercenary to protect her body. To summarize, Han said that the number of techniques he could use was small. However, it's not a hopeless situation, it's just a mercenary. No matter how you look at it, the yokai demands blood. So all he has to do is use the fighting techniques that quench his thirst, said Han. The mercenary asked in what way? After all, there could be no such technique in a demonic school. In terms of not being able to ask Han? Taking all of his energy in his right hand, Han demonstrated something impossible that shocked the mercenary. Here it is, the mercenary said. Han. A demonic attack of brutal blood. A chaotic technique, tearing all of the opponent's blood arteries. For a bloodthirsty creature, she's just right, mercenary. The mercenary saw the most demonic brutal blood attack that is only known from legends. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw it. The mercenary was told at school that the technique had disappeared. Even among the elders it was said that the technique could not be restored. How can a person who is not even an elder use a demonic attack with a brutal hand? The mercenary thought. Seeing the mercenary fall, the Khan said that he had already fallen from the demonic attack of a brutal hand. When the time came, Han said that he had already answered his question. Now it was time to go. Now without the winged one, we'll have to sweat to find our way. I guess I shouldn't have trusted him with the chicken. Told the mercenary to rise. Saw the mercenary get down on one knee and offered him the scroll. And said he accepted? The Khan asked him what he agreed to. The mercenary had agreed to what they had talked about on the roof not so long ago. If the treaty was still in force, he was ready to make it now. He had never forgotten the glint in Han's eyes when they had first met. That look made him realize that this was no ordinary man. The mercenary said, "It's incredible to receive an offer from Han to extend his contract." The mercenary had been waiting for Han to tell him, but he couldn't take it anymore. So he asked Han to give him a chance to serve him. "If you agree, hired man, all you have to do is sign." But the hired man could not find a pen, and Han held out his bloody finger for a seal. "You're absolutely right," said the mercenary. "There is nothing more accurate than a print." "As expected from his employer," said the mercenary. Putting his finger on the contract, the mercenary was very happy about it. It was finally time for him to learn a new technique, he thought. If his employer gives him these techniques, he can wash dishes for him for 100 years. Seeing a red energy behind the mercenary, Khan walked into it, and told the mercenary to follow him. The mercenary said if he had been indiscreet, he asked Khan to give him a second chance. But Hans said that's not the point. Hans saw a new drawing on the slab. The mercenary looked at it, and thought it might be the portal from which the monsters had recently come. But the mercenary's ability to memorize the path was a 10. Han turned to the dark swordsman, and said that something seemed to be wrong. He pressed it all the way down, and the portal doesn't work. Unfortunately, the map shows a structure of 8 floors. There is no information about the further path in the map, the mercenary said. He decided to look around to see if there was another road nearby. But suddenly Khan stopped the mercenary, and told him to look up. The color is a little different up there. The Sword King used magic to survey the way ahead. The Sword King said if she was having a hard time, have her move back. After all, the Hillers are the hearts of the assault squad. The Sword King felt that after reaching the 4th floor, the speed of the assault had noticeably slowed down. It was probably due to the fact that they didn't take a break and continued walking through the force. Suddenly, the teacher came over and said that he was worried about the condition of their squad members. The Sword King said that everyone was having a hard time, but all they had to do was take energy stimulants and hang in there. Master ordered everyone to take energy stimulants and to eat them on the go, without stopping. Namgung-ho was tired, for they had reached the 6th floor. In the entire time, they had gone through 4 battles. It would be strange not to be exhausted after something like this. Be that as it may, it is inexcusable to miss such a precious chance. It is necessary to concentrate to gain even more knowledge, said Namgung-ho. Suddenly, the uncle told Namgung-ho to take the energy stimulator. He told him to live slowly and then swallow. Namgung-ho told his uncle that he had heard a conversation that when they reached the 8th floor, they should maximize not their vision, but their feeling. What does that mean? Namgung-ho asked. Uncle said that he thought Namgung-ho was not used to this because he had only been in ordinary dungeons. After all, from the 8th floor onwards, a much thicker darkness begins, with absolutely no light filtering through. As the type of enemy attack changes, it is important to rely not on your physical strength, but on the intonation, said Uncle. Uncle told Namgung-ho not to forget to circulate the heart defense energy. But suddenly, the warriors shouted out to attack, and ordered the squad to prepare to attack. The Sword King told the squad to assume a defensive posture, and for everyone to huddle together and put their backs together. Suddenly a strong wind blew and turned into a tornado. The teacher saw the creature and called it a kind of banshee. He ordered everyone to be on the lookout. The Sword King swung his sword and said, "Go ahead," and ordered them to keep their guard up, because if they fall under the curse, they'll be in big trouble. Namgung-ho said, although the Sword King softens the shockwave with sword energy, the power of the attack is still tremendous, telling himself he had to stay conscious and hold out no matter what. But in Namgung-ho's eyes, only hatred for these creatures blazed in his eyes. Uncle Namgung-ho shouted to everyone to get ready and said, "Strike team, go." Namgung-ho flew by everyone like a meteorite. Uncle asked Namgung-ho if he was injured or not. After all, he's not even in the strike team. Why did he lunge at the beast alone? Why act so recklessly? Namgung-ho calmed down and apologized to his uncle, saying he was fine. The Sword King told Namgung-ho that his action was appropriate to the situation. More than just an academy student, he was able to withstand the children's souls, because it was not something one would see very often. Namgung-ho asked, in what sense is a soul demon? Banshee's scream was a large-scale curse magic that damaged our entire squad, said the Sword King. After all, he had reduced the impact of the attack thanks to the sword energy, but the magic effect was still very strong. A few people even from the assault team, in a daze, were unable to counterattack in time. It would have been dangerous if the situation had been prolonged. However, Namgung-ho was able to break the curse and deal with the monster at a fast pace. Maybe the Sword King should watch Namgung-ho. The Sword King said if Namgung-ho continues to develop his skill in the same manner, perhaps after he graduates from the academy, we can meet again. The Sword King has ordered everyone to rest, and having healed the injured, they will continue on their way again. Namgung-ho was flying in the clouds after the words said by the Sword King. Walking up to him, his uncle said, even if you were praised by the Sword King, it doesn't mean that the deed was 100% right, Namgung-ho. But no matter what Namgung-ho says, safety comes first. So if he makes a mistake next time, he will suffer very deeply, Uncle Namgung-ho said. But Namgung-ho was in his own thoughts, For not long ago he had been wondering how he could keep up with the Sword King, and now he praised him, saying that he was moving in a black direction. Namgung Ho thought for sure the Dark Swordsman was making notes with the same spirit back then. To this day, Namgung Ho still remembered his spirit. Come out that Namgung Ho is on the same level as Dark Swordsman. But no matter what, I won't stop here. Let's move on, said Namgung Ho. The Sword King saw the teacher and asked him what he was thinking about. The teacher said that at times he could feel the echo of small vibrations around him. The dungeon labyrinth is underground, said the Sword King. Isn't such a phenomenon commonplace? He asked. The teacher said he might be playing with his imagination, but remember, we only met one monster. There must be monsters everywhere in the underground labyrinth. The instructor said not to worry because the black rat bracelet on his wrist reacts to deadly energy. In other words, they can recognize with precision the target we are heading for. That bracelet was the shortest way for him to get here. Suddenly there were strange sounds. The warriors thought the dungeon was collapsing. The teacher said that from the sound, some kind of mechanism had been triggered. The Sword King turned to the instructors. Had none of them heard that someone other than them had entered the dungeon? While Han and Mercenary were in the deepest floor of the dungeon. Han, not knowing where they were, asked the Mercenary where they were. The Khan looked ahead and saw a man. And he looked very familiar. The Mercenary asked, who did Khan think he saw? That's the knight, said Mercenary. That's how Han thought he'd seen him somewhere before. The Mercenary warned Han to be careful. After all, the Death Knight was no match for the creatures that had come before. Drawing his sword, the Death Knight began to advance on the boys. The Mercenary shouted, "Damn it, he's coming!" Drawing his sword, the Mercenary was also ready to fight. With the swords clashing, the Mercenary felt the immense power of the Death Knight. Hearing this, the Dark Knight laughed. As Han watched the fight, he realized that he would finally be facing a worthy opponent. He decided that he would watch the Mercenary take him down. The fight between the Death Knight and the Mercenary went on and on. The Mercenary didn't realize that he would be so good at deflecting his blow. Seeing the flaws in the Death Knight's technique, the Mercenary used a demonic small arm attack. By immobilizing the Death Knight, the Mercenary had a chance to kill him. But the Mercenary knew that when a Death Knight is stronger on horseback. But with a mare like this, the Mercenary's attacks were irregular. The Mercenary felt that he was going to have to sweat a lot. So he told Han that he couldn't divert his attention and help him yet. Let him look for the necromancer. After all, a Death Knight never walks alone. If he's here, there's a necromancer nearby. But it seems to Mercenary that he will not be easy to find. Ordering Han to find the necromancer at all costs. It's the only way they can save themselves. Looking forward, a whole army of monsters appeared in front of them. They couldn't even count the number of them. They had nowhere to run, and on top of that, another Death Knight had shown up. Their fighting spirit was fading. They were in the worst possible position, Han said to the Dark Swordsman, looking at the dude sitting behind the monsters. Is that a necromancer by any chance? Han asked. And he looks much more intimidating than he did in class. Han told the Dark Swordsman to stay out of the way and just stand still. Suddenly, they began to advance. But a Mercenary has no right to ignore the orders of his employer. After all, the transmission of the demonic attack technique of Beast's blood is at stake. If the monsters make another 5 jang forward, he won't be able to react in any way. He won't be able to fight back. But if he doesn't accept any attack, he's finished. Lowering his head inwardly, he wanted to act. Pleading with his employer that if he was going to do something, he should let it go. With his sword unsheathed, the Mercenary was ready for battle, shouting to the monsters to pounce. But suddenly Han appeared, and calling the Mercenary a buddy, told him not to yell. Suddenly, Han activated an attack called Tongue of Flame. Taking the power in his hands with a blast, he used the flame tongue ball to shake the underworld. Striking the monsters, the explosion was such that the monsters were torn to pieces. While the Mercenary was surprised that he had just used the flame language. This is the same technique that is transmitted through writing. Khan was frustrated that the fire with its explosive force could not spread evenly. Only those in the front were fried. The rest are unharmed. At this rate, they will be at a disadvantage. We must be prepared for the worst, said Han. Suddenly Han shouted to the Dark Swordsman, and said, no time, he explains once. You have to fulfill two conditions to use the demonic beast's blood attack. The first is to apply the spiritual technique of reversing the flow of blood, which causes thirst and desire for blood. The second is to excite the meridian points with which demonic attacks are applied. Then, you will cause a dizzying effect, which, although it will be accompanied by pain, will increase his power. Since the mercenary has a demonic small arm attack, you can forcefully restore his internal energy. The mercenary asked Han what spiritual technique he should use to induce bloodlust and desire. Mercenary, there are several ways, but now use the enemies in front of you, said Khan. The mercenary asked in what way. Han told him that there were monsters around, capable of applying the curse at any moment. If you are subjected to the curse and fall into the state of a soul demon, there are only two outcomes. Either destroy yourself, or escape the curse and kill the monster. But if one overcomes the state of the soul demon, an understanding of the use of spiritual techniques will come to mercenary, said Han. Suddenly the necromancer was using magic called Jayarubinda, ordering his monsters to kill the strangers, while the mercenary decided to act quickly. But first he began to build up his inner energy, and Han, preparing for battle, circulated his inner energy for the offensive. With a baleful look, he shouted to them, "Let's warm up." Khan was so harsh that he broke one monster after another to arrive at his goal. With that kind of power, the monsters don't stand a chance. His life is at stake here. He used the demonic attack of his small hand to tear them to pieces, but they were not finished. Taking the sword in his hands, he said to them to see how to use the sword. And with the demonic attack of the bloody hand, the mercenary, while watching Han, he only marveled at how crazy Han was. Not only does the Hira use simply stunning techniques, he also walked into the very center of that army of monsters. How unshakable his self-confidence is to be able to pull off such a gamble. Anyway, fighting so illiterately after all, said the mercenary. Suddenly the mercenary was attacked by a death knight and stabbed with his spear. The mercenary had time to react and dodge. The mercenary was angry, because that first death knight was no pushover either. But the second one had a spear. So we'll have to fight at a different distance, said the mercenary. Pulling out his sword, the mercenary said he was ready in battle. But at the sword strokes, the mercenary felt his strength. But he said not to expect the knight to take the mercenary down in no time. It's a good thing, the mercenary said. After he defeats him, he'll be the mercenary who defeated the Death Knight. Han, fighting monsters, said he had a weak monster. He took a couple of blows, and he's already fucked up. He looked at his sword and saw that the blades on his sword were dull. So the fight has been going on for a long time, Han said. Khan has fought monsters alone and slain several hundred of them. And the necromancer keeps summoning new ones. Han thought about it, and said that he should conserve his internal energy as much as possible. When he heard a strange sound behind him, he saw a dark swordsman and a death knight fighting. Han decided that such an opponent was still a bit difficult for him, but there was nothing he could do to help. He must find the answer himself. The dark swordsman only needs to understand the true meaning of Han's words. A few hours ago, Khan asked the mercenary if he had fought a necromancer. The mercenary asked him why he was asking. Han wanted to just tell him something, but little did the mercenary know. At the academy, Han was told that the magic of the necromancer's curse is quite harsh. And a sissy like a mercenary can't withstand it, so be prepared, Han said. The mercenary said he's been around this kind of evil for years. Han knows where the mercenary comes from, he asked. Han said that demonic martial arts make the undead step aside. However, this eliminates the possibility of facing them head-on. No matter how strong he is, he can't escape the magic of the curse. It attacks the mind. If you find yourself under a curse, remember one thing you can't do. It's true that mercenary's fear makes him crazy, but it can't kill him. When he realizes that, you'll see fear as your only enemy, Han said. The mercenary's spin on the fame of the Hirer is very detailed. It's not like he just happened to hear it from someone. It was as if he had come to the realization himself. Does the employer really know something? The mercenary wondered. But he asked how he knew it. One goat once caused Han a lot of pain. A necromancer was nothing compared to him. Han wondered if that guy was in hell right now. The Death Knight kept attacking the mercenary relentlessly. Mercenary began to feel his stamina getting lower and lower. The mercenary thought it was because he was using his left hand. The mercenary decided that he needed to decide the outcome of the battle as soon as possible. With all his energy in his hands, he attacked the knight with a demonic small arm attack. Slamming sword to sword, mercenary realized he had overpowered his attack. Mercenary couldn't take it like that. He decided he had to defend himself. Suddenly, the mercenary was distracted by the demonic flesh armor, and the Death Knight struck a blow that crushed it. Lying on the ground, mercenary said that this Death Knight and the one he had fought once were just heaven and earth. Just a horse added, and already such a huge difference. Simple attacks won't crush him, the mercenary thought. Getting to his feet, the mercenary said he had to think of something. But when he looked up, he saw the head of the banshee. She must be killed quickly, said mercenary. Suddenly she cast a spell of oppression. But the mercenary only then realized that it was a curse of exhaustion. The banshee said he was going to die. They're coming to kill him. And when he dies, it's over. The real end will come. And the mercenary will cease to exist. Saw the monsters coming at him. The mercenary thought that was the end of it. But suddenly he heard the stranger say that he would not die. He said that fear torments him and makes him go mad, but it cannot kill him. When he realizes this, you will see fear as your only enemy. Suddenly the mercenary thought, and what he has now blurred in front of his eyes, perhaps these are his enemies. If these are the real bodies of his enemies, how the hell is he supposed to fight? Hearing the sounds around him, the mercenary began waving his sword and shouting for them to stay away. Suddenly, the monster struck hard and the dark swordsman fell down. Lying on the ground, the monsters started beating him up. The mercenary only cried out in pain and shouted for them to die. Suddenly a miracle happened and mercenary got to his feet. Gaining strength, he said the enemy he has to kill is slumped over, shouted the mercenary. Pulling sword shards from his chest, he bathed in blood. But still, he had a lot of spirit. He said only by slaying monsters could he retire. But suddenly he fell to his knees in front of the Death Knight. He no longer had the strength to continue the war. The Death Knight approached the mercenary, and raising his spear above his head struck a blow. But no one expected the mercenary's hand to save him from death. When he opened his eyes, he saw that something had fallen on him, and it was his hand. When he regained consciousness, he felt his heart beating erratically, and it was hard to breathe. He couldn't understand what had happened because he should have died from the last blow. But he's still alive. The mercenary felt the fear coming again. The curse still ruled his body. But strangely enough, the mercenary is no longer afraid. He stopped the blow with his hand and said that such a low life did not scare him, telling the Death Knight that it was his time to attack. Taking the horse's head, the mercenary drove it into the ground in anger. Remembering the words that he was going to die, he didn't fully understand how it happened. But thanks to his employer, thanks to him, the mercenary was alive. Han had been fighting alone against a lot of monsters all this time, and all the while noticing that he was wasting a lot of energy. Han thought about what technique he should use to defeat them all. But in front of him he saw a Death Knight fighting the Dark Swordsman. Han asked if such a brat could even wield the energy of the sword. He's not an easy beast, Han said. But with an opponent like Han, he's still unlucky, Han said. As the Death Knight struck, he managed to pull the reins and mount his horse instead. Lucky him, of course, said Han. How dare he get involved in a crucial moment of the fight? The necromancer was getting on Han's nerves. And he's using such crude attacks. Suddenly, the Dark Swordsman turned to Han. Han saw his hand and was surprised. He asked what happened to his hand. The mercenary said it happened, but he thought it was because of Han. The Dark Swordsman will never forget your kindness, he said. Han tells mercenary that he's fine now, but he won't last long like this. The condition is not normal, for the parasite is moving, devouring mercenary's life. You know, mercenary, that a donor whose blood is consumed by this thing is in danger. And they don't have monster blood, Han said. But simply put, the parasite would sooner go mad. The mercenary will inevitably go mad and the body will be taken over by the parasite. Suddenly the monsters disappeared in a moment. The mercenary asked Khan why he had suddenly withdrawn his army. Khan replied that he was using a luring tactic. He knows that once we get here, we won't back down. Looks like his bony head has finally thought a little, said Han. What was he thinking? Han thought, walking forward. The necromancer called them mortals. and asked if they knew where they were. The mercenary was surprised that he spoke their language. Han laughed, and replied that they were in his grave. The necromancer said that Han was brave, but at first it was all like that. People like you have come here more than once, the necromancer said under the pretext of some kind of raid on the dungeon. He asked Han what he thought the reason was. Han laughed, and said that there was nothing to think about. After all, there was only one reason, and it was him. The necromancer had never met him before. The necromancer said that Han's self-confidence was different from what he had seen before. The necromancer said that Han's self-confidence was different from what he had seen before. You two have only 1.5 capfuls of internal energy left. You won't have that much left for long, the necromancer said. Did it matter now? Han asked. The necromancer called him a fool and decided to show him what was waiting for him. 2 days ago, some men from some scouting party visited this cocoon of one of the fallen. Not as good as you guys. He died in battle as a death knight, said the necromancer. But for managing to make it here, congratulations, necromancer. But you're still no different from the others. You're just prey, the necromancer told them. I give you guys a choice. If you agree to die in peace, I'll kill you as painlessly as possible. I'm showing mercy to you personally. Han said this typed correctly after using the flame tongue technique half of the internal energy captcha and flew away at once. Even after applying the spirit technique twice, the energy recovers at a snail's pace, said Han. Looks like the necromancer's got obstacles all over the labyrinth. All to steal our inner energy. Suddenly the necromancer turned to the dark swordsman and told him to listen carefully. Finish in 15 minutes. But that time must not be exceeded. The necromancer said that he would not be surprised if at any moment a parasite took over the body of the mercenary. All he could do in such a situation was to crush the Death Knight and swallow its magic. But if he can suppress the Death Knight and replenish his internal energy, the attack can be avoided, said the necromancer. The necromancer asked if they were done talking. And he thought what they were going to do, but they were communicating with the help of Khanum. So you're not going to give up, the necromancer said. The mercenary was surprised to see the 2 Death Knights they fought. They were reborn back. Zahn told the dark swordsman that the necromancer had heard them, so there was no point in Khanum anymore. Han told the dark swordsman to put his hand on the tanjan of those creatures and apply the spiritual technique he used in normal times. After all, the origins of the technique of absorbing the escape demon that steals the energy of the opponents also started from there. Sitting on the throne, the necromancer told the boys, whatever plans they made, it was all useless. The necromancer asked them how they wished to die. Slit your throats or tear your bodies to pieces, he asked. Han turned to the necromancer with a question. Ask him what his amount of internal energy was. The necromancer said that was such a good question, for a final question. Well, it doesn't really matter, the necromancer said. Before his death to such a question he could answer, said. Necromancer said 7 captcha. Han hearing this said since he has 7 captcha, that means it was originally a total of 8. Han said it's beautiful. He will be able to reach the transformation level in one go. The necromancer told Han that he was talking nonsense because he didn't have the strength to do it, and ordered his monster to kill them. Khan, seeing the monsters attacking, didn't wait long and moved into battle, crushing everything in his path. But suddenly, the Death Knight decided to try to attack Han from the side. But Han had anticipated this blow, and used a sacred defense technique. Han, mocking the Death Knight, said that sneak attack was not bad. If he got it, he'll give it back twice as much. But suddenly, jumping over all of them, Han aimed at the necromancer. Gathering all his energy, he said, I got him, you little goat. The necromancer sitting quietly on the throne said these only feelings of confusion. Han suddenly felt his body weakening. It was the necromancer's curse. Judging by the fact that everything was blurring in front of his eyes and sounds were not reaching his ears well, he confused Han's senses. Han didn't understand how it had happened, for there were no faces around. They didn't tell me about this curse in class. It seems to be an ability that a necromancer has. Han was starting to get pissed off. He couldn't even use the spell because of the low amount of energy. In such a case there was only one way out, Han thought. Then focus on his intuition and use it to sense the hostile energy. Even though the necromancer had brought the perception into chaos, it didn't disappear on its own, Han said. Even if Han's hearing is impaired, with vision and other senses paralyzed, it's still the same senses. If the necromancer has confused Han's senses, all he has to do is awaken the others and it's a done deal. Han asked the necromancer how long is he going to keep up his cheap tricks? But now Han sees everything. Watching this, the dark swordsman couldn't realize who he was. He wouldn't even be able to squeeze into this fight. The necromancer didn't originally have a mind. If Han's assumptions are correct, then this is high-level confusion magic. After all, it's only a necromancer using the most powerful confusion curse, said the dark swordsman. Be that as it may, it is rather beyond common sense for the hirer to continue fighting with absolutely no regard for the curse. He demonstrates the techniques of the celestial demon school, which mercenary has only seen in old books. Perhaps the hirer will indeed be able to defeat the monsters and their lord, said dark swordsman. Han was very angry at the necromancer's antics, and used a fire attack. But the necromancer said he was surprised by his techniques. However, didn't he say Han's blows wouldn't touch him? Suddenly, Han's attack speed became completely different. The necromancer said it was unthinkable. How a human with so little internal energy could move like that. And he didn't just say necromancer quickly. And it's as if the movements are being read. Could it be that he's using a stealthy stepping technique? The necromancer has no idea how he was able to learn this technique with such low energy. However, the stealthy step technique would burden his body. The necromancer used a bone spear attack. But Han was so fast that he missed all his blows. Striking the necromancer, he broke his bone armor. Lying on the ground, the necromancer asked how he had so much strength. For his information, necromancer, circulating energy through breathing training is not the only way. How can you instantly increase your internal energy, said Han. Han said he would like to correct his ignorance, but of course. It would only take all of the necromancer's inner energy. Suddenly the necromancer came to his senses, and asked Han how he had dared to leave a wound on him with his dirty hands. The dark swordsman was surprised that he wasn't a skeleton. Before he could shout to Han that he was being attacked from behind, Han was grabbed. The necromancer told Han that he would show him how much power there was between them. It doesn't matter if it's magic or martial arts, inflicting a 9-heaven dragon attack. Han was surprised at how he knew Kunlun's technique. The attack was so strong that Han was defeated.